So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for being here already. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, this is the first time I'm actually streaming my set review live on Twitch, and then I'll be re-uploading this on YouTube right after. So, Knights of the Frozen Throne, it's coming. It's going to be out in 2 days from now. And yeah, wanted to do the usual public service of the Reynad set review. The only set review that matters. So, I'm going to get right into it, kind of go through it class by class, and then get into the neutrals, and yeah, give you guys my thoughts on all of it, like every card in the set, or where I think it'll fit in. I'll try not to make too many safe claims, even though a lot of these cards are like super hard to evaluate this set. But yeah, for everybody subbing, donating, thank you guys very much. I do appreciate it. I did turn my alerter off while I'm recording this because I'm going to be putting it on YouTube, so I'm going to make sure I thank everybody right after the set review, which should take probably like 3 hours, maybe 4, depending on how lazy I am. So, getting into it, we're going to start with Druid. And right off the bat, we have Trump's reveal card from the Frozen Pwn, Ultimate Infestation. So, the late game cards in Hearthstone have traditionally been pretty weak. The developers kind of realized in the early sets of the game that since you get mana so much more consistently than in a game like Magic, where you play lands and your mana is inconsistent, your late game cards have to be toned down compared to other card games, because you're going to get to 10 mana pretty reliably, especially in a deck with ramp. Now, Knights of the Frozen Throne, overall, not just this card, but the expansion overall has kind of shown that the late game cards are now power creeping super hard. Like, the amount of late game absurd finishers in the set is, I think, more than in every other set combined, and should be interesting. It definitely promotes getting to the late game so you can play these kinds of powerful cards, and we might see a much slower metagame than what we're used to. So, you know, that combined with things like Tunnel Trog being out of the game, the early game minions being a lot weaker than they used to be, all those factors might make this metagame pretty slow. And in a slow metagame especially, holy crap, this card's nuts. 10 mana, you spend the game ramping up, you play Fireland's Portal, you gain some life, you draw 5 cards for no reason, but you do. And then that's going to draw your other Ultimate Infestation, so you play that one. Hope you haven't decked yourself at this point. This card's insane. This is a lot of value. It really rewards, you know, playing all those ramp effects in a deck. Things like Mire Keeper all of a sudden start to make sense. You might even be able to just fit this in Jade, even though that deck has so much late game already. Maybe this is better than like Gadgets and Auctioneer, for example. This is just such a powerful card. I expect this to see a lot of play. I expect Druid ramp decks that we've already seen find success, like Big Druid. That deck's arguably better than Jade Druid anyway right now, but cards like this really encourage those types of archetypes. So definitely a lot of tools for just a value-oriented Druid deck, and that was actually the very first deck I was grinding on ladder competitively before there was a ranked mode in Hearthstone. So I definitely look forward to playing that type of deck again. This card does everything you want, gains you life, gives you board presence, draws you 5 cards, which, yeah, it's just infinite value. Chains into itself. You can play 2 of it. This card's nuts. So moving on, we got Crypt Lord. It's really difficult to find a Druid deck that wants like an undercosted Mogushin Warden. At 3 mana, that card gets kind of interesting, but Crypt Lord really rewards you for playing a lot of dudes. So it's like a Druid deck that plays a lot of animals wants a more aggressive minion, and a ramp deck that wants like a big taunt is not going to be playing that many minions to buff this guy's health. So overall, I just don't really expect this card to see too much play, just because there's no deck that it really fits into, although the stats and the cost are pretty reasonable. So moving on, we got Strong Shell Scavengers, a 4 mana, give your taunt minions +2/+2. So you really need to have like multiple taunt minions for this guy to be worth it. I think in order to make him a good play, obviously you need 2 taunt minions minimum, which conveniently is how many taunt minions Sunfury Protector and Defender of Argus both give you. But Sunfury Protector and Defender of Argus are not exactly like powerful cards. This is a very aggressive battle cry, which taunt Druid decks don't tend to be very aggressive. It's another one of those types of cards where the ability just isn't really in line with the type of deck that's going to have taunts. So I don't expect this to see too much play, even though there are a lot of new tools in the set for buffing your taunt minions. I mean, maybe in a deck with Crypt Lord, maybe in a deck with Spreading Plague, and this guy, you can kind of make like a mid-rangey taunt guys Druid deck, but I just don't see that being better than a very aggressive list or a very ramp-oriented list with a lot of removal. So maybe I'm wrong. This card is insane if you get it off on 2 minions, like actually insane. But I don't expect it to be that common. So, all right, moving on. We got Nash, which is a little variant on Bite. This one's better than Bite, and I think it's actually better than Claw. Claw saw some play when Undertaker was in the meta because you just needed a 1-mana answer and Druid for it. And also the deck played Gadgetzan Auctioneer, which made it better. Nash is definitely worse value per mana than Claw, but overall, 3 damage on turn 3 is makes more sense to put in a deck than 4 damage for 4 mana for Bite. So the way I kind of look at it is like a worse Bash. And Bash was a card that actually saw a lot of play in a control-oriented warrior deck. So the issue right now is that the decks in Standard are so good and have so many good cards in them, and then we're adding in this expansion, which just introduces so many more good cards. So it's really tough for just like a decent card to see play again, unless it does something that a deck didn't already have access to. So this card is not going to be in there for the life gain reason. That's what you're going to play Feral Rage for. It's just going to help you more in matchups like Mage, where they're trying to kill you by going face. It's not going to be able to kill big minions, which is like a type of ability that Druid really needs right now. So overall, I don't think it'll really find a place, just because it's like a card has to be so broken now to make it into your deck list. This card isn't quite broken, but it's a solid role player card. I'll gladly play it in Arena. In Constructed, it's like playable if you want just like a decent spell. Like, it's never going to be horrible, but in my opinion, it's just not broken enough to see play in Standard right now. Webweave's an interesting card. At 5 mana, it's pretty much garbage and it won't see play. But at 4 mana, it would be way too good. So there's actually like no way to properly balance this card. So I kind of feel Blizzard's pain. Like at 4 mana, this would be one of the best cards in the game, or at the very least in Standard. People kind of undervalue a 1/2 poisonous spider. Like it's a minion that you have to use a spell to remove. The only good way to deal with a 1/2 poisonous minion is to have a weapon charge, and not every class has access to that. So, or actually like Potion of Madness is good against these two, but yeah, basically the card is bad, but at 4 mana it would be too good. So there's nothing Blizzard really could have done to make this card like in a good spot. So yeah, we'll kind of move on, but yeah, I don't expect us to see very much play. So you got Spreading Plague. People on Reddit were saying that I pronounced the word plague wrong. I don't know. I learned English in Minnesota. Up there, they call it plague. I don't know how the hell you guys say it. Plague-wee, plague-way. I don't really care. You're the weird ones, not me. 5 mana, 1/5 taunt. If an opponent has more minions, cast it again. So you want to be playing it on an empty board, basically, to maximize value, and you unleash the taunts. Plaga. That sounds so dumb to me. Plague is 1 syllable. It's so much better. American education, lol. Do you know how many countries the English have invaded? There's like 20 different ways of speaking English correctly. Fuck you, chat. All right. Anyway, this card I actually think has some potential. It's a card you can ramp into. Jesus Christ. Can I like close Hangouts so I don't get... Fuck, can't believe that showed on stream. That's really bad. I'm gonna do it this way. think I fixed it. Let me see what leaked. Okay, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I had my text show up on my computer, so I had to kind of change some things so those stop popping up. I think we should be good to go now. The only last thing I might do is just blow this up so you guys don't see the top of the browser, and then, yeah. All right, cool. So overall, this should be better. Great. All right. So Spreading Plague. Anyway, yeah, this card's pretty solid if you fall behind early. You get a decent amount of value, especially against token-oriented decks. A 1/5 taunt is worth roughly like 2 to 3 mana. So if you get 2 of these, you're kind of paying for itself, and it's so possible to get even more than that, right? Like it's very realistic to get like 3 taunts out of this. If you ever get 3 or more, it becomes pretty insane. Overall, in a more like defensive oriented Druid deck, I see this as being a pretty good way to slow the game down, and I wouldn't be surprised if this card ends up being kind of a lot more powerful than people expect. It's one of those cards in the expansion, and there are so many of these. There's like dozens of these cards where it's right on the fringe of playability, and depending on what the metagame looks like, maybe it will be insane and it'll see play in like every deck, or maybe it'll just be awful and it will like never see play. It is very matchup specific, like the spots where it's good. For example, like if I'm playing a control mirror against Warlock, it's really not going to be that strong. But as an anti-aggro tool, it's just really, really good at slowing the game down. So, you know, I expect that it's probably not going to see play, but if there's a lot of Pirate Warrior going around, if there's a lot of token Shaman, like these kinds of things, this card will be fantastic. So, kind of a metagame call, and yeah, I'll move on. So Druid the Swarm, it's a great 2-drop. It becomes a 1/2 poisonous thingy spider, I assume, or a 1/5 with taunt for 2 mana. So both of these are pretty reasonable. 1/2 poisonous is an incredibly powerful stat line. Back when Pit Snake came out in Rogue, I said that if it was a 1/2 instead of a 2/1, the card would be like broken. Druid is not Rogue, obviously, but poisonous is a lot better in Druid just because you have a hard time dealing with big minions. So anytime you can have that keyword on a reasonably statted card, it's actually pretty decent. So I wonder how this works with Fandral. Like, do you combine the stat lines? I don't really know. That would be kind of nuts, right? Like a 2/7 poisonous taunt for 2 mana. It's disgusting. But yeah, powerful card. Expect us to see a lot of play. You can play it in mostly the mid-range or slower Druid decks. I don't expect this to see too much play in the aggressive lists. Druid of the Swarm, the thing about choose one Druid cards is that a lot of the ones that see play are the ones where either effect you would play on its own, even if it wasn't a choose card. So the poisonous stat line on this is basically Stubborn Gastropod, which is not a card you would play in Druid on purpose. And a 2 mana 1/5 taunt is also not a card you would play on purpose. So because both halves independently are like not that good, they're not like cards you'd play on your own. Like Nourish you would play if it was just 5 mana draw 3, and you might also play it if it was 5 mana ramp 2. But yeah, Druid of the Swarm doesn't really fit that bill. So I wouldn't be surprised if it sees no play. I wouldn't be surprised if it sees a decent amount of play. Maybe like as a 1/of to give you like a third 2 mana card that you can mulligan for, like Wild Growth. But yeah, overall it's decent. I think that there's going to be so many strong cards in Druid now that it's just not going to make sense in a lot of cases to play a card like this where it's just like decent. But we'll really see at the end of the day what the metagame looks like. It's possible that a 1/5 stat line is just really strong in the meta. Just depends. So I think it's yeah, I think it's decent, but it's kind of like a fringe card, right? Like it might see some play, might see no play. It's not broken by any means. All right, we got Fate Spinner, which is probably like the coolest design in the set, just as far as like how it plays out. You choose a Death Rattle secretly, and it AoE buffs your stuff, or it's a Hellfire. And the cool thing about Fate Spinner is, like, it's a card I won't get to play much because I stream, but man, this card's so interesting. Like, the way you play around both Death Rattles is completely different. Like, if I have a bunch of dudes in play and they have a bunch of dudes in play, like, basically, how do I put this? I would never pick the Hellfire in that scenario. I picked the +2/+2, right? So they start trading into my stuff. How do I describe this, man? It's there's so many scenarios, so many board states you can think of with Fate Spinner, and it's, I guess in a nutshell, like, the way you play around both Death Rattles is completely different. Somebody's getting blown out very often with this card, and it's just an interesting little mind game. I think it'd be really fun to see how it's played. It's just kind of like it's like that age-old game where, like, I saw it in like Sherlock episode once. There's like 2 cups of water or whatever, and like one of them's poisoned. And you put one in front of that guy and one in front of you, and then they have to like guess which one they want to drink or whatever. It's like whoever's thinking on like one level above their opponent will kind of blow the other guy out. I don't know. It's kind of cool. Functionally though, like, will this see play in standard? Is it a good card? That's kind of the question a lot of people want answered. I think mostly you just have to ask yourself, is it worth playing a 5 mana like Hellfire that's tacked onto a Death Rattle? Because most of the time it's what you're doing, right? You're going to use it as an AoE effect. I mean, maybe if you really are desperate for help in like token Shaman matchups and stuff like that, maybe you'll play this. I think Starfall's better, but it's yeah, I'm getting a lot of question marks. A lot of you guys don't know what I'm talking about. It's whatever. I don't know what it's called, but I think it's just a game theory thing. I don't know. But yeah, Fate Spinner is interesting. I like the design. I think it's cool. Do I think it's going to see a lot of standard play? Absolutely not. Druid cards just have to be too good to make the cut now. So Yomi, maybe a Prisoner's Dilemma. That might be it. Yeah, I don't know. All right, moving on. We got Malfurion the Pestilent. So this is a pretty good tool to ramp into over time. I wish they would show the hero powers. Why don't they show it with the hero power? Alright, so you gain 3 attack this turn, or you gain 3 armor. Any hero power that lets you kind of get out of burn range by chaining armor is incredibly powerful. The fact that you get 5 up front, you get your taunts, or you get your spiders up front. Taunts are usually going to be better, but I mean, it depends on the board state. The fact that taunt's an option is pretty sick. I don't know. Basically, this card is great to ramp into. I think this is an auto include in your more defensive, value-oriented Druid deck. This is going to kind of be the bridge between your mid-game taunts and your ultimate infestation late game. And yeah, it's a great card. I do expect it to see play. Again, you're just trying to slow the game down, get some value out of stuff. The card just does everything. You know, if you're playing against a control deck, getting 3 attack every turn is pretty damn powerful. If you're getting 3 armor every turn, that's going to close the game out against like a Pirate Warrior or like a Burn Mage. So yeah, it's a great card. Expected to see a lot of play, and just a solid middle of the pack Death Knight. Pretty good card. So yeah. You get 10 armor with Fandral and Innervate. I doubt you get 10 armor with Fandral. Getting both abilities is pretty cool. You get both choices for the hero power. Wait, what happens if you Fandral this out? You get both hero powers forever, or only while Fandral's in play? I don't know. Chat can't help. You get only while Fandral's in play. Ah, okay. Cool. Well, a little bit of bonus synergy. So, and finally, we've got Heiser Knox, the last Druid legendary. So, this is a disgustingly powerful death rattle, but the more I think about it, the more I kind of don't expect it to see play. There's a lot of ways for this card to get blown out, especially against other control decks like Priest that can just like steal him. You can't really kill him yourself unless you're playing like Starfall and you can like shoot him yourself and then trade him into something. It's a card that is like, the effect is insanely powerful, but it's so hard to trigger and there's so many ways to get blown out. And like the fact that it does actually nothing against aggro makes me just want to play something like Ysera instead, or I'm going to get a more reliable trigger on the ability. So as a purely anti-control tool, do I think this is the best option? Probably not. I would rather play like a single copy of Jade Idol in a non-Jade deck. I really don't see this card doing anything against aggro, and because of that, I have to look at it purely from the angle of like, okay, what's best in a control mirror? And almost every time I'd rather just play one more late game card or another like source of card draw, something like that. So yeah, you can get this off Barnes, which is pretty nuts, but then they just kill it right away and you're not going to res them any taunts. So yeah, I'm not too high on Heiser Knox. I think the card's pretty mediocre. All right, moving on, we're going to grind through the saddest part of the expansion, which as usual is Rexxar. We got a 4-mana Consecration that's easy to play around. Exploding Bloat Bat. Card's mediocre. You are not trying to slow the game down as Hunter. Hunter has the best hero power in the game. It scales as the game goes on because your opponent's life total becomes smaller and smaller. So it feeds into itself. The Hunter hero power wants you to be aggressive. You want to be grinding down their life total. You want to be using your hero power late game when they're at 10 or less life, and every time you use 2 mana and 0 cards, you're reducing their life total by 20%, and then 25%, and then 33%, and then like 50% when they're at 4. Hunter hero power just gains strength as the game progresses and as your opponent's life total gets whittled down. These cards, all of this control-oriented garbage, goes completely against that hero power. So it's a type of gameplay that completely ignores... It doesn't just ignore Hunter's biggest strength, but it removes Hunter's biggest strength. Because when you're playing a control-oriented Hunter deck or a slower Hunter deck, you're basically taking your strongest asset, which is your hero power, and you're throwing it out the window. So not only are you lacking a hero power like other control classes that can heal you or finish off 1 health minions or draw cards like Warlock, but on top of that, you're removing your strongest asset in that you're making your hero power worthless. So will I play this in a tempo or a more aggressive oriented Hunter deck? No, I think the card's pretty mediocre. It is stronger than it looks, but this is just like, this is only good in specific matchups against specific boards. Even then they can play around it reasonably well. They do kind of have to trade into it, but only after they trade into your other minions first. This card is mediocre. Moving on, we got Abominable Bowman, which is a, let's see, Death Rattle, summon a random friendly beast that died this game. So if this was Battle Cry, it'd be pretty strong, but Death Rattle it's very slow to get going. It's not unreasonable to ignore a 6-7 at that stage of the game. We're going to start seeing like the Priest 6-mana mind control seeing play. We're going to start seeing a lot more freeze effects in the game. Like if any of those freeze cards see play, you can't play a 7-mana Boulder Fist Ogre. And then even if the Death Rattle goes off, you're probably bringing back like a 2-mana or a 1-mana or a 3-mana card. Like, you're not always getting Savannah Highmane off of it. It's just too slow. It's a value-oriented card. It's decent value, but it's just too slow to see play, and it doesn't line up well against the new mechanics coming into the set. So this is not what Hunter needed. Hunter needed a way to not lose the board early game to every other deck, and it didn't really gain too many tools for doing that. Got Deathstalker Rexxar, which is probably the worst Death Knight. I kind of mentioned the word Planeswalker earlier in the review, and I do think that it's kind of relevant in that Blizzard has. Let me separate this out. Blizzard has kind of done what Magic did back in the Lorwyn expansion, which is create a flashy new card type that's like this big glorified version of their main characters, and it's super powerful. So every Death Knight is like pretty strong. Even this one is like strong, even if it's the weakest of all of them. So that to me is kind of interesting. I think it's really going to help things like pack sales, because there's these legendaries that you can really chase now, whereas before legendaries in Hearthstone had really niche effects. They weren't like strictly better cards that people expected them to be when vanilla first came out in Hearthstone. But now it's kind of changing, right? Like now there are these chase legendaries that are actually like super, super strong. This is the weakest of all of them, and it's still playable. So yeah, the hero power lets you craft your own beast. It's a 2-mana card. You basically discover 2 beasts that each cost 5 or less mana. You combine their text boxes, and you combine their stats, and you combine their mana cost, and that's the card you make. So you're basically drawing a good card with the hero power every turn. So it's like a little bit better than the Warlock hero power, which, you know, it does help. I mean, you're getting rid of the useless Hunter hero power in a slower deck, and then you're getting this. But yeah, I'm not a big fan. It doesn't even do 2 face damage. They could have just said deal 2 damage to all enemies at least. At least you would have gotten Consecration, but it's just super slow. I'm not a fan of this card. I don't think it really, even as strong as it is, I just don't really see a world where you play this unless you want a singleton copy of a card that's going to beat control for you. If you're playing against you know, a really slow metagame with a bunch of slow control-oriented decks, and Deathstalker is like your way to kind of outvalue them that they can't interact with. You play him, you start drawing big beasts, you play those, you kill your enemy with those. Maybe in that kind of world it's playable, but yeah, I'm not too impressed with this card. I think it's not quite what Hunter needed, even though it is playable. But yeah, it's not an auto-include in every Hunter deck, that's for sure, and it's really metagame dependent if something like this is worth playing at the end of the day. So, but still a really strong card, you know, which is kind of what the Death Knights are, or the hero cards are. I think it's a really cool type of card for Blizzard to have made, by the way. I think like Draxus has always been one of the coolest mechanics in the game. I was really impressed they even made that card in vanilla. Like that early, that effect that cool. And yeah, now they're making more of them, which I think is great. I'd be pretty excited to have more hero cards every expansion. Alright, now we got Stitch Tracker. Battlecry, discover a copy of a minion in your deck. So at first I thought this card's kind of mediocre because, you know, a 3-mana 2/2 that draws a card, it's like a Cabal Courier. It's not really something that you want to be doing in a normal Hunter deck. But then I started thinking, like, okay, well, if a normal Hunter deck isn't going to work, what kind of Hunter deck would work? What kind of minions would I be playing in like a weird type of like spell-oriented Hunter deck, for example? And the more I was thinking about this, the more I thought back to the Secret Hunter deck that I built right when Cloaked Huntress first came out, which was like, you know, like a billion secrets, very few minions. The deck played like 5 minions. You could like Barnes into the good ones all the time, things like that, you know. And in that kind of deck, when I can play Stitch Tracker, and every single time I find like Professor Putricide or a Cloaked Huntress, and I can just pop off because I'm playing like 12 secrets or something ridiculous, and I have like Yogg-Saron in there because I hate people. That would be an interesting deck to fit this into, because then you're basically discovering whatever you want on demand, and I think that's kind of interesting. So I might try, you know, a very minion light Hunter deck where I play like 5 or 7 dudes, and then I always discover the broken ones. I can like get Professor Putricide every single game. Like that would be sick. So yeah, I'm kind of excited to mess around with it, just because I know Hunter's going to be the worst class in the game overall, but there might be that one deck that I can make tier 2, and it's just like this ridiculous combo-oriented thing. Even though we don't have lock and load anymore, it still would be pretty fun. Bear Shark for the memes. It's half bear, half shark. 50% bear, 50% shark. 0% playable. What Hunter doesn't need is more mediocre 3-mana cards. You have so much 3-drop garbage that you can play already. I would rather just play Huffer. But yeah, it's interesting. If they make Shark Bear at some point, that'll be cool. But yeah. Easy dust. Alright, Corpse Widow. A lot of people are hyped up about this card. Your Death Rattle cards cost 2 less. For me, when I see this card, I really have to immediately compare it to Tundra Rhino. The thing about charge is it's just like the strongest keyword in the game. So when somebody plays Tundra Rhino on curve, not only is it like not that far below curve as far as the stats you're getting off Tundra Rhino, but if they don't kill it, they lose the game next turn. So why am I talking about Tundra Rhino when I'm looking at Corpse Widow? Well, you can't really play both. You really only want like 1 5-drop, and I basically compare the cards head to head to see what's going to see more play. So in like a traditional mid-range hunter deck, you always rather have Tundra Rhino. The cards are just better. Even though this card's like newer and sexier, it's just not as good. The stat line on this isn't good enough. I wish it was a 5/6. It's fine. Like, it's not horrible, but maybe in Wild this is better than Tundra Rhino, because then you can immediately play like Mad Scientist and Haunted Creeper and Kindly Grandmother. You can like immediately play those things off of it. But you know, realistically, you're not going to be playing Kindly Grandmother off of this thing in Standard almost ever, because you're going to play your Kindly Grandmother earlier in the game. So yeah, I'm just not too impressed by this card. I don't expect it to see too much play. This is not going to even change Hunter's strength in the metagame at all, because it's like maybe a marginally better 5-drop. I mean, let's say it is better than Tundra Rhino. Is Tundra Rhino being not good enough the reason that Hunter's mediocre? No. Getting a marginally better 5-drop is not going to change too much. So will it see play? Maybe. I mean, it's way better in Wild than Standard, but it's not like, it's not the difference maker between Hunter being garbage and being playable. So, you know, you can check this one off the bingo board. Another Hearthstone expansion, another garbage Hunter card that triggers Death Rattle that's unplayable. That's cute. We got Venom Strike Trap, which is actually a card I want to talk about, because let's imagine a mythical world where Hunter is playable after this expansion, right? Let's really dig deep and stretch our imaginations thin and imagine a universe where Hunter is playable after Knights of the Frozen Throne. I know it's hard. I think it will involve a secret-oriented deck with Professor Putricide, Cloaked Huntress, Stitch Tracker to reliably get your broken minions. And in that kind of deck, you know, since we're playing like 14 traps anyway, we're going to need something like this. I think this is better than Snake Trap. It's way harder to deal with a 2/3 taunt. Like a Jungle Panther is it's like the best Hunter secret in the game, the Cat Trick. In that one, you're basically getting Jungle Panther at a 1-cost discount. This one, you're getting Emperor Cobra at a 1-cost discount. And even though Poisonous isn't as strong as Stealth, and it's this one's easier to play around, it's still a pretty powerful card. And I think like any secret that gives you board presence at a discount is worth thinking about. So I like it. I think it will see play in that secret deck. I'll probably play 2 of it. And yeah, don't mind the card at all. Then we got Professor Putricide, I keep talking about. He's a 4-mana 5/4. After you play a secret, put a random Hunter secret into the battlefield. So you probably want to play like, I mean, if you even play like 1 secret off of him, he's good. But, you know, there's definitely those games where if you get really, really greedy, I mean really greedy, right? Your opponent has nothing on the board. You play Cloaked Huntress. You have Professor Putricide in your hand, you have all these secrets, and you have a decision to make, right? Well, you could play your secrets now and just be really far ahead on board. You can like kind of hedge and just play one of your secrets, or you can try to like shoot the moon or whatever the phrase is, where you play your Cloaked Huntress but you don't play any secrets, and then like if by some miracle it stays alive for a turn, you go Professor Putricide and then you blow him the fuck out. So that might be kind of fun, like if you ever actually get to make that happen. But it's not that consistent. You need the Huntress, you need to have board control, which you're not going to have because you're playing secrets instead of good cards. Professor Putricide is just a 1-of. You're not going to draw it that often, but you know, it's a card I expect to discover off the Stitch Tracker a lot. It's a deck that I think is going to be falling behind on board early and then trying to catch up by playing secrets later. And yeah, it has some potential. So you know, the card's solid. You can't just play it in a normal Hunter deck, I think. I think it does have to be a dedicated secret one. And if all the tools are there to make that deck playable, then, you know, we'll see. But, yeah. Alright, now we got Toxic Aero, new Hunter removal spell. Hunter just has way too much 2-mana stuff. I really wish that they just like changed the number on this or something and made it do like 1 damage. Or made it cost 1 mana or 3 mana and do more. I don't know. Like 2 mana is tough, but yeah, if you have a medium-sized guy, you can shoot it and then trade up. If you have, or if you don't have that, you can use it as a 2 mana 2 damage just removal spell. It can't shoot to the face. You know, it has utility, but it's tough to justify putting this into a deck. When other classes of cards like Jade Claws that deal 2 damage twice can go to the face, increase your Jade count, can get developed on an empty board, and then like bank the 2 attacks. When you compare that to Toxic Aero, it's like the board control comparison is like embarrassing for Hunter. You know, any early game weapon just invalidates cards like this by quite a bit. So I don't expect Toxic Aero to see much play at all, and it's a pretty mediocre card overall. Like maybe in a control-oriented deck, you just want 1 more removal spell, and in that world, you end up playing it, but I'm not too optimistic. So, done with Hunter, all uphill from here. We're going to go into Mage, which is currently the best class in the game. Yeah. Mage is the best class in the game right now because it has the best early game opening, which is Mana War Arcanologist. It has a broken card, which is Ice Block. It has a lot of burn. It can play from ahead. It can play from behind. It has a good strategy against every type of archetype in the game. You have card advantage. You have like just objectively strong cards like Fireland's Portal. You have a really strong late game with like Medivh and Alexstrasza, just a lot of flexibility. Like Mage is really in a good spot right now. So Mage doesn't need that much to get better. So yeah, I just kind of keep that in mind when I talk about these cards. So, Simulacrum, copy the lowest cost minion in your hand. We've seen a lot of pretty terrible mage spells like Molten Reflection that actually ended up seeing a lot of play, just because mage is such a flexible class. Like, not only does it have good aggro decks and good control decks, but now it's starting to have combo decks thanks to things like the new mage quest. And Simulacrum, even though like in a nutshell it's not a powerful card, it's not something that I would recommend playing in just like an average value oriented mage deck. This is the type of card that if and when it sees play, it's going to be in some weird combo deck, and you're going to be like copying Emperor Thorson when he's the only minion in your hand, or you're going to like copy Arcane Giant and then just pop off with quests. You know, like if I play 2 Simulacrums, 2 Molten Giants, 2 Arcane Giants, that's like 6 Giants I can have that I just like throw down on a board, play my Time Warp, and then, you know, kill my opponent. There's potential in a card like this, even though in a vacuum it's not like too insane. I'm going to be looking to play this in combo decks, and when you do a set review, you can't really guess what type of what the combo decks are going to look like. You know, I think it'll play the Mage Quest, whatever deck this is in. Arcane Giant seems like an obvious copy to me. Emperor Thorson in Wild seems like a great copy, but yeah. Oh, you can also, with Simulacrum, you can actually copy Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of like you have a third copy of a Sorcerer's Apprentice, which does actually matter. That could be very strong, actually. So moving on, we got Cold Wraith. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this card. Spider Tank is great, and this one draws a card sometimes, which is insane. If freezing people is just a little bit easier, this card could see a good amount of play. And in like a tempo-oriented deck, I mean, I like the look of this a lot. You can play it with like Water Elemental, which is great. You can play it with Breath of Sindragoso, which is a good card anyway. You already have Frostbolt. I like Cold Wraith a lot, and you know, if there's a more tempo-oriented mage deck around, I expect this to see some play. This card's solid. Frozen Clone. After your opponent plays a minion, add 2 copies of it to your hand. So, another mage secret that you play around in the same fucking way you play around every other mage secret. That makes all of them collectively weaker. The fact that if I want to play around, if my mage opponent has 2 secrets in play, I know that it's going to be like Mirror Entity, Potion of Polymorph, or Frozen Clone in a lot of cases. So, like, in all of those cases, you're playing your small guy first. This one, you still get, like, if they can't just play Babbling Book or Swashbuckler into your Mirror Entity, like, you're still going to get the value from Battle Cries, which is cool. But Mage doesn't really need more card advantage right now. You have plenty of ways of drawing cards. You have so many more value cards just in neutral added to the game now. Now you have Frostlich Jaina, you have Syndra Gosa, you have the Lich King, you have Medivh. You don't need like random card draw effects anymore. So I really don't expect this to see any play. And no, this does not help its chances. We got Doomed Apprentice. So Blizzard's kind of introduced some mechanics to the game that kind of make your opponent's stuff harder to play recently. Back in vanilla, Blizzard talked about this policy where they don't want to make mechanics that make your opponent discard cards or make your opponent's stuff like harder to play or just like mess with their turn because it's unfun. But they've kind of started to explore that design space more and more now. We have that 6-mana neutral Loatheb thing. We got this guy. They printed like Dirty Rat recently. So we're starting to get like more cards that mess with your opponent's stuff. I think Blizzard's making a conscious effort to make sure these cards are not playable. At 3 mana 3/2, this is completely unplayable. At a 2 mana 3/2, we would think about it. Like, I would probably play the card as a 2 mana 3/2, but like only in tempo decks. It would be pretty good, actually. But yeah, if it's 3 mana 3/2, this will never see play in anything. It's just bad. The stat line would have to be better. It would have to be like a 3 mana 3/4. Well, that would be too good. Maybe like 3/3. Maybe like a 2/4 would be best. I don't know. But yeah, this is unplayable, but they're starting to push that design space more, so it's like kind of interesting. We'll see if they get aggressive with it again in the future, like with Loatheb. Loatheb they just made because as an overreaction to Miracle Rogue being good, but yeah. All right, we got Glacial Mysteries, which is a really beautiful card to open before you disenchant it 20 seconds later. 100 Dust is cool. I mean, you're expecting me to pay 8 mana, make half of my deck unplayable, and then not affect the board after I play it? This card's garbage. Moving on, we got Ice Walker. Well, basically, I should say why it's garbage a little more, basically. An 8 mana card that makes you play bad cards in your deck, as in Mage Secrets, needs to do a hell of a lot to be worth playing. If this came with like an 8/8 on top of it with Taunt, then we'd be talking. Then it's like a really big mysterious challenger. But as is, it doesn't affect the board. Your opponent's killing you, you play your 8 mana card, you pass back, you're dead. Well, you're not dead, your ice block is popped, and then you're dead the next turn. This card's bad. This needs to affect the board immediately if you're going to play an 8 mana card like that. So we got Ice Walker, which is an interesting one. This is one of the ways to kind of enable Cold Wraith, even though you can't really play Ice Walker and Cold Wraith and trigger Cold Wraith on curve. So that is kind of tough. It's a really interesting card to me. I mean, Blizzard's been a lot more careful with the early game stats on minions lately. They don't want any more 1 and 2 drops snowballing the game. It's something I've been arguing since 2013. I'm glad they finally changed it in recent expansions. But yeah, Ice Walker is like, he's not unplayable. He's fringe. It's just on a 2 mana, how do I put this? It's a 2 mana card, so you're kind of encouraged to play it early, but you don't want to be hero powering early. You want to be playing minions early. You want to be playing spells early. You want to be controlling the board. Freezing stuff early doesn't deal with the problem. You just kind of force yourself to overload a lot. So in that sense, you're talking about playing this guy like later in the game, which is also pretty mediocre because like for 4 mana, you're like freezing one guy and putting a 1/3 in play. And the next turn, if you want to freeze again, you have to like commit 2 mana again. Basically, like as a late game card, the stats are too bad, and as an early game card, you don't want to be hero powering early. It's the same issue with like Fallen Hero, but Fallen Hero is even better to hero power with early because he actually killed stuff. The only redeeming quality of this card is the fact that it's an elemental, and I think you're going to be playing a light elemental package in most mage decks that are trying to play Jaina as a finisher. But yeah, overall, probably not good enough to make the cut in anything, mostly because you don't want to be hero powering early, and you don't want to be playing that card late. And next we have Ghastly Conjurer, which might be like, this and Jaina might be like the best cards in Mage this expansion. This card's actually insane. So good. You're going to play this in every single Quest Mage deck ever. Um, it's just solid. I don't know. You get decent stats. You get mirror image. You get all the spell synergy off Mage. You stop like Pirate Warrior from killing you. The stat line actually trades into things for a while. You're slowing the game down. You're gonna trigger your quest off of this. It does a little bit of everything together, all in one neatly wrapped playable package. So I'm a big fan of this card. I expect this to see a lot of play, at the very least in Quest Mage decks, possibly in more decks than that. Without Emperor Thorson, it's been harder to make Antonidas work in most decks. You don't really want to be playing bad cards like Mirror Image or Arcane Missiles, but with Ghastly Conjurer that might change, right? Like now I can play this, I can like Curator for Mukla, all of a sudden I'm making 3 fireballs the turn I play Antonidas. Like, this card's good. I like this card a lot, so big fan of it. It's probably the best or second best Mage card in the set, probably second best. Then we got Frostless Jaina, which is probably the best Mage card here. You get a bunch of armor. The hero power on this card is deal 1 damage if you kill a minion, summon a water elemental. So the fact that your elementals have lifesteal this game is super important. Lifesteal is an ability that changes in power level depending on the class we're talking about. It's at its strongest in Warlock, and it's at its strongest in Warlock, Rogue, and Mage, and it's at its weakest in like Paladin, Priest, decks like that. So why is that? Well, it's because some decks always have had a lack of healing. And the lifesteal mechanic is kind of changing that. Like, Warlock and Rogue always had a weakness to like mages just throwing burn at their face, or you know, decks just basically ignoring the value game and going for direct damage. Why is Control Warlock bad right now before Knights of the Frozen Throne? Well, it's because it doesn't have Antique Healbot. And if we had Antique Healbot, Control Warlock might be a tier 1 or tier 2 deck. That's literally the only difference, is like, if you could play like 6 Mistress of Mixtures, or if you had Antique Healbot, the deck would be insane. Just right now with the cards we have, as far as Control Warlock, that is. So why does that matter for Jaina? Well, it matters because Mage is another one of those classes that's not supposed to have healing. But now I can just kind of attrition out my opponent in the late game, thanks to this thing, which I'm going to draw most games because I have Arcane Intellects and stuff, and I'm going to draw like half my deck before it's turn 9 anyway. The card's good. There's some really strong synergies we got to kind of think about, like Baron Geddon, which just is nuts with this, obviously. Get a water elemental right away, which is fantastic. It's just a good card. You get some armor. Again, like the armor alone, if there was a Mage card that just like you could play and it just gave you armor, like Shield Maiden, like, I don't know, it'd be very, very strong. So I expect Control Mage to be a very high tier deck now. I don't know, you have so many late game options now between Jaina, Medivh, Lich King, Syndragosa. I don't know which ones you'll want. It's possible you just want to go Kazakus with this kind of deck, but then you're kind of missing out on 2 Arcanologists and 2 Mana Worms, which is some of the strongest aspects of the deck. So yeah, you know, you're probably going to want to play like a very light elemental package, whatever deck you put this into. It's good, you know, I mean, it's playable. I'm not going to say it's an auto-include in every Mage deck. It's possible you just want to like play a Lich King in addition to a Medivh and Mage, and just that's it, and never even touch Jaina. But we'll see. It does kind of give you inevitability, just like a lot of these Death Knights do, and I'm kind of interested to see how different Death Knights running into each other play out, because it'll be interesting, like, since all of them give you like inevitability, as in like a way where you will indefinitely win the late game. You know, if two of them go head to head, one of them should lose, right? So like, it's kind of interesting to see how this lines up to like the Paladin or the like Warrior or the Warlock Death Knight hero, and kind of see which late game is better. I think the metagame might end up doing this thing where the control decks become gradually greedier and greedier, introducing different specific tech cards, trying to go over the top of each other in these long, grindy attrition matches. It'll be cool to see how it all plays out. But yeah, you know, there's so many powerful finishers in the game now because of this expansion. There's literally more strong finishers in this expansion than every other expansion combined in the history of Hearthstone. So it's really going to encourage late game oriented decks. It's really going to encourage combo decks that beat those decks. and we'll see how it all plays out. Let me go ahead and mute Slack, because that shouldn't be open. Should also probably plug in my earbuds. There we go. Okay, so next we got Sindragosa. It's pretty cool. It's a big dragon, summons 2 frozen champions. I believe that when the frozen champions die, you get a random legendary. What is this? There we go, frozen champion. Death Rattle, add a random legendary minion to your hand. Yeah. So it's basically another 8 mana value card. It's competing with Medivh, it's competing with Lich King. I can say definitively that this card is worse than the Lich King. But is it worse or better than Medivh? Well, probably Medivh is better than this card as well, because you get the value right away. Why the fuck isn't this right click box going away? You guys aren't seeing what I'm seeing. Jesus Christ. There we go. Okay. Yeah, Sindragosa is... Yeah, I expect this card to not see too much play, unfortunately. When I first saw it, I was like, okay, cool, this is a card that's, like, definitely worth playing. You kind of want a second Medivh in some of the Mage decks right now. This is, like, a good finisher. It gets value, but the truth is, now that Lich King is a card, and Lich King actually has taunt, so it does something against aggressive decks, there's no longer really space for this. Like, I don't think you want Sindragosa and Lich King and Medivh, and it's just the worst one of the 3, so... Don't expect this to see too much play. There's some cute synergy with Jaina, where you can like ping off your own champions and stuff, but I'm not too impressed by this card. I don't expect it to see too much play unless the metagame becomes so insanely greedy that we just want to play all the 8 drops. Yeah. Next, you got Breath of Sindragosa, which is a pretty powerful card. Random, like Flame Cannon was a really strong card back in the day. This is a lot worse, but 1 mana deal 2 damage has always kind of seen play in Hearthstone, and this one has that additional freeze effect, so it's actually pretty good against the more expensive minions as well. Breath of Sindragosa is the most playable new freeze thing that they gave to Mage. I think it's definitely better than Ice Walker, and I do expect this card to see play. Whether I expect to see it as a 1 of or a 2 of, don't really know yet, can't really say yet, but it kills stuff. It kills stuff reasonably consistently, and the fact that it's random is definitely a massive drawback, but it is a effect we haven't had in Standard without Arcane Blast, so I wouldn't be too surprised if we see a lot of this card moving forward. I also wouldn't be too surprised if we see almost none of it. Like, both things are equally possible, but yeah, I think this card's... It's playable. It's playable. It's another one of those fringe cards where I can't definitively say, like, yes, this is in every Mage deck, or no, it's in no Mage decks, it sucks, or it's only in these specific Mage decks. We don't really know. Like, the power level's there to where it can see play, and, you know, depending on how the metagame shapes up, and what the Mage decks look like, that'll kind of decide whether that ends up being played or not. So, we're going to go into Paladin. Paladin gains a lot of life already, so lifesteal is kind of at its weakest in this class, but I will start off with Chillblade Champion, which is a 4 mana 3/2 charge lifesteal. There is some lifesteal synergy in this expansion that makes this card a little bit more interesting. Overall, a 4 mana Paladin card has to do a hell of a lot to see play, because True Silver and Consecration are just better than like every 4 mana card they can make. On top of that, you've already got Blessing of Kings, which is also an insane card. Blessing of Kings is like a 4 mana 4/4 charge. Like, Blessing of Kings in a control deck is a good card. So Chillblade Champion has to do so much to be better than that. It's really good at killing 1-attack minions, because then you're going to double the life gain you get off of it. They're basically going to have to hit it a second time and you gain 6 instead of just 3. But it's also cheap, so like the lifesteal earlier in the game is less likely to give you value, because if you've had board control up until that point, they're not really going to get you, you're not going to like gain the full 3 life if you're already at like 29 or 30, you know. Overall, I think it's not going to see too much play. It's not a card I want to play in my aggressive lists. It's not a card I want to play in my control decks. But there is this Blackguard card, which might, I'll talk about that later. It might make a deck with a lot of effects like this worth it, but I'm pretty skeptical until I see more lifesteal synergy. There is one thing worth noting, which is this neutral 4-mana card. There's this guy who basically gains a bunch of abilities based on what abilities are in your deck. This card is super strong, and Wicker Flame Burn Bristle gives you most of the abilities on that card, but if you drop Wicker Flame, like if you draw your patches, basically, your Wicker Flame, all of those 4 drops are going to suck. So this might see play as a one-of, just in case you draw your Wicker Flame, so that your neutral 4-mana guys get their abilities. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if it sees play as a one-of, just so that you have an additional lifesteal guy in your deck, just in case. But yeah, other than that, don't expect to see too much play. So then we got Uther of the Ebon Blade, which is maybe the best card in the expansion. It's like close. It's like this or the Lich King. This card is so stupidly stupid. I don't know why they made it, but they did, and it was on purpose. This is like everything you want in a control tool in the game. It gains you 20 life. It kills your opponent. I don't know what more you want from a card. If you're losing, it's good. If you're winning, it's better. Yeah. You curve Tyrion into this garbage. I don't... Why is it in the game? I don't know. But it is. Control Paladin now has a gross finisher. Whether Uther is enough reason to play Auction Master Beardo in Standard, I don't know. Auction Master Beardo is basically like Spider Tank, but he's going to work like Garrison Commander, where you get only like 1 additional hero power, because they're just going to kill Beardo. But yeah, basically it means that if you ever have 2 horsemen in play, you're threatening lethal. Because for those guys that don't know, sorry, I should probably say what the hero power is. I should say what the hero power is. Does this website show me the hero power of stuff? Here we go. The 4 horsemen is the hero power. Summon a 2/2 horseman. If you have all 4, destroy the enemy hero. Summoning 2-mana 2/2s is great already. And if you have 4 of them, you just happen to win your control matchup out of nowhere. It's crazy. So yeah, this with Auction Master has some potential. Yeah, you can play Burgly Bully and a bunch of coins. That's like if you're really greedy, though. That's like only good against control. I don't know if Burgly Bully's worth putting in your deck just because of this guy. But, I mean, yeah, in a nutshell, this card's stupid. Just if you're going to play Control Paladin, just craft it. The card's so good. It's so good. It's actually disgustingly good. It's probably, maybe like the best control finisher in the game. I can't really think of a better one. Like maybe Lich King's better. Not really. I mean, this 5/3 lifesteal weapon, like Jesus. But yeah, that card's really good. All right. Next. All right. Next, we got Desperate Stand. So they took Keeper of Uldamon. Or sorry, this is the give a minion death rattle, return to life with 1 health. Strictly worse than Ancestral Spirit. Strictly worse than crappy Shaman card. That's actually not so crappy. I guess it actually sees playing a tier 1 wild deck. But yeah, rezzing Paladin stuff is pretty good. Anything with Divine Shield, bringing it back on command is super powerful. Even like rezzing Chillblade Champion, getting to attack twice is potential. I mean, it's a card that's kind of gimmicky. It doesn't just do good stuff for you on every board state, although there's a lot of natural synergy with like Wicker Flame, Tyrion, anything with Lifesteal. It's a card that is like playable, but I don't really expect it to see play, if that makes sense. There's just too many good things you can put in a deck nowadays. This doesn't quite make the cut. It's just not quite strong enough compared to the other broken things you can be playing. Now he's got Blackguard, which is like a super interesting Paladin card. The stat line on this is fantastic. The ability is fantastic for control. You kind of have to build your deck around it a little bit, but Blackguard is super powerful. I mean, this is the kind of card that just locks your opponent out of the game once it's going off, and I wouldn't be too surprised if this became a staple of, you know, control paladin lists. It's just so powerful. Locks up the board. Your control opponent can't ignore it. Your aggro opponent can't. I mean, they're going to try to ignore it. It's not going to work too well. It's an interesting card. I mean, I can't really say definitively that it's better than Spike Ridge Steed, for example, or Sunkeeper. It's definitely not better than Sunkeeper Tarim. But maybe you play a singleton copy of it to kind of help shore up the late game. And maybe it becomes a core part of Paladin, depending on what the lists end up looking like. Right now, I think probably not, but maybe after the next expansion. It's just a great card to lock up the game in the late game. But I wouldn't be surprised if it sees like 0 play for now. And we've got Howling Commander, which is draw a Divine Shield minion from your deck. This card a lot of people thought was pretty good because it gets like Tyrion every time or something in some lists. I think this card's kind of garbage. I kind of compare it to Stonehill Defender. And one of my least favorite arguments I hear from people when it comes to card expansions are like, oh, well, it's strictly worse than that. Because you can always play like 3 or 4 copies of something. Like, just because something's worse than like Water Elemental doesn't mean you don't want more Water Elementals. Now, this card is worse than Stonehill, but I don't think you want like a 3rd or a 4th Stonehill. I don't think it's good enough. There's too many good things to put in Paladin. This card's probably not quite making the cut. You can do some crazy things with like getting the spell damage guy maybe, or getting Wicker Flame most of the time. But you know, getting Wicker Flame to play on turn 4 if you're going first is just not that impressive. The stat line's not quite there. I don't think this card's going to cut it. Yeah, I'm not too impressed by this. So I don't expect to see too much Howling Commander moving forward. We got Light's Sorrow. We know how good 4-mana 1/4 weapons are in Hearthstone historically. Please, for the love of God, disenchant this garbage. There's no circumstance in any deck or any metagame where this will ever see play. Please disenchant. Next, we got Bolvar, which has some of the coolest artwork in the expansion. Unfortunately, that's just trying to make up for the fact that he is pretty bad. We've seen some vanilla 5-mana 4/7s in the game before. That stat line's not good enough to see play. This is a lot worse. This is like, it's like a 1/7 without taunt with Divine Shield that like becomes a 3/7 and like will maybe become a 5/7 if you're lucky, but this card's just bad. Like, there's no deck that wants this. There's no deck that's going to play this. I don't want this card in my list on purpose over other 5-drops. I would recommend disenchanting Bolvar if you got him. Maybe I'll eat my words and there'll be a deck where he's like decent, but fun fact, there won't be. He's trash. Moving on, we got Arrogant Crusader. They have this weird death rattle mechanic where if it's your opponent's turn, summon a 2/2 ghoul. I really like that they're trying to introduce more counterplay into Hearthstone. I made a lot of videos about how counterplay is like a core element of fun video games, and in Hearthstone it's really hard to implement just because of the nature of the way you interact with your opponent. You're always just targeting their guy to kill it, or you're targeting their face. There's not really a lot of room for counterplay in any way. But this is kind of an elegant way of introducing it. Like, now basically your opponent has to make a decision. Like, do I let this thing keep hitting me in the face? Do I just give him the 2/2? With this card, it's not a particularly interesting decision because if it's in play, it means that you're playing at rank 23, and none of your decisions will matter too much. Whoever has the first big legendary will probably win the game. But the mechanic itself is something we see reflected across a few cards in this expansion, and even though this one's not playable at all, it's kind of interesting that they're trying to find some counterplay. So Dark Conviction, super interesting card, definitely playable. It's one of those cards that's right on the fence there of things that you might want in a Control Paladin deck, or maybe not. If you're trying to OTK a Control Mirror opponent with Uther, and you're using Auction Master Beardo, you do need some spells in your deck, right? So Consecration's like too expensive. Forbidden Healing, also too expensive. It uses all your mana. So Dark Conviction's one of the few like decent control paladin spells that you can just throw in and kind of just hold it in the mirror until you have a target for it. Because we see some really powerful big neutrals getting added, like the Lich King, having just a consistent answer for a big minion might be pretty valuable now. So just because of that card being in the metagame, Dark Conviction might be a lot stronger. You can play it on Righteous Protector after turn 1. It's just an overall flexible card. It doesn't give you like consistently insane value the way that Keeper of Uldaman does, but it's still very strong. So it's flexible. So just as like a Lich King answer alone, that might end up seeing play. And also, like I said, Control Paladin's going to want a couple cheap spells just so that you're threatening the OTK and the Control Mirror once you have 2 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Then we got Righteous Protector, which is insane. Yeah, Argent Squire is a good card. Argent Squire is going to see play just because they added a bunch of Divine Shield stuff. And this one's just like strictly better. And yeah, you're going to want to play it in your buff Paladin decks with Kaleidosaur. You're going to want to play it in your aggro Paladin decks. You're going to probably not want to play it in your control Paladin decks. It's kind of a subtle nerf to Stonehill Defender, which I think is good. I think Stonehill Defender is too strong in Paladin. And this will tone it down a lot, which is good. But yeah, overall it's a really solid card. It'll see a lot of play. And yeah, just ubiquitous 1-drop. I don't think you play it in just like a random control deck, most likely, but you could. Alright, moving on. We got Priest, which is a really interesting class in this expansion. First of all, we got Lifesteal, deal 1 damage to all minions. It does it to all minions, so you can kind of pop off with Northshire Circle rather than just it being Arcane Explosion. Lifesteal, I think, is kind of at its least valuable in Priest because you can just heal naturally. You know, Lifesteal is like at its best in Warlock. Like Warlock would kill to have this card, but Priest doesn't really care. You know, if I want to deal 1 damage to all minions, I'll play Wild Pyromancer. Spirit Lash just seems like not too impressive to me. So I most likely wouldn't be including it. Something like Potion of Madness is better at dealing with small minions. I just have a hard time seeing a world where I want to play this card. So I expect it to not see too much play. And it's not because it's weak, it's just kind of in the wrong class. And there's other effects in Priest that do that better. You got Shadow Essence, summon a 5/5 a random minion in your deck. You can probably do some crazy stuff with this card where you like play I don't know, like a Barnsey Charge deck or some kind of minion that you just really want to cheat into play. But I think it's just too, like the stat line and the cost just don't really make sense for most of the things you could be pulling. So I don't expect Shadow Essence to really see play. It's one of those cards where if it does randomly pop up in a meta deck down the line, it'll be as part of some combo to try to cheat something into play. And yeah, it's one of those cards to keep an eye out for as more expansions get released in the game. But right now, there isn't really a place to use it. I mean, even with the Lich King, it's not like that insane. We've got Archbishop Benedictus, which had the most hype of any card revealed in the entire season behind it. I've never seen so many people get excited about a card. So it kind of it was a cool social experiment in that it showed you the types of things that the Hearthstone player base gets excited about, which is cool. I mean, it is an exciting big effect. But yeah, you shuffle a copy of your opponent's deck into your deck. So, like the competitive player in me wants to say like, oh, this card's garbage, it's unplayable, there's no meta where you want to play it, da-da-da-da-da. But that was kind of before I saw all the other cards revealed for Priest. Every single Priest card in this expansion, except for like this guy, kind of pushes you towards this archetype of Priest that I used to stream a lot. If you guys remember, about a year ago, I used to stream a lot of Fatigue Priest. Fatigue Warrior is popular in the metagame, and I tried a Priest version back in the day, which was like really hard to play, but you could definitely fatigue people and do pretty well with it with time. This deck, or this class, is kind of better at it now. You have a bigger Thought Steal, you have a cheap mind control, you have a way to actually kill all the Jade stuff, and then you have a way to remove Jade Isle from your opponent's deck with the neutrals. Like, it's possible to play a Fatigue Priest control deck that literally is just all removal and like a Benedictus and then like this guy. So that would be pretty crazy. I'd be kind of curious to see if that fits into the meta somehow. If that's not a deck, this is not a card that'll really see play. It's a very fun card, but it's not really a card that you just throw in a priest deck because you opened it and it's good value. Does not work that way. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm not going to write it off completely yet. All right, next we got Obsidian Statue. I love this card. It's so much value. I love seeing just big control cards that just take a dump on aggro and get a bunch of value. It taunts, it gains life, kills stuff, sort of. I mean, the Death Rattle just makes the taunt on it a little bit more effective, a little bit clunkier. It is another Death Rattle minion if you're playing Priest Quest or if you're playing N'Zoth. It is one of the strongest things in the game to N'Zoth. Anytime you play N'Zoth, you just want to pull taunts. And this is like the spiciest taunt. At 9 mana, it's not like a consistently good card against aggro, but it will lock up the game if you get to that mana cost. So even in control matchups, it's solid. It's not like overpowered, or it's not a card that I'm going to say is insane the way I said Primordial Drake would be insane. But it's a card that's like good and can see play in the right type of priest deck. Maybe it's as a 1 of, maybe it's as a 2 of, maybe it's as a 0 of. I don't know. All I know is that the power level is there for the card to be very playable. So, and then we got Shadow Ascendant. At the end of your turn, give another random friendly minion 1/1. This is a really powerful stat line on a minion. As Priest gets more 1-drops, cards like Shadow Ascendant might get very, very strong. Priest already, like the best version of it ever to have existed, has been, in my opinion, the Silence list that was really popular at the beginning of this metagame. That list was really strong, and it was very aggressive. You're trying to kill your opponent by like turn 5. And it's not just with the combo, it's with getting board control. So if we had like more Northshire Clerics or just more 1-drops, a card like Shadow Ascendant is actually like super powerful. So I'm kind of optimistic for this card down the line, because I think a lot of the strongest priest decks are going to be very low curve. Even something like Light Warden that people don't think about is actually a solid 1-drop in the deck. And, you know, Light Warden into this thing is like, I don't know, better than it looks is what I'll say. But yeah, right now probably doesn't really have a deck for it. Alright, and we got Acolyte of Agony, which is a 3-mana 3/3 lifesteal. Earthring Farseer is a card we used to kind of see in Priest back in vanilla, just because there was very little good burst healing, and you could heal Injured Blade Master with it. This can't heal Injured Blade Master. The class doesn't really need lifesteal, so I don't value this card very highly in Priest, even though lifesteal as a mechanic is super powerful. If you're looking for an anti-aggro card to just throw in the list, this will do exceptionally well. I think in any other class, this would be so good, outside of like Priest or Paladin. God, this card in like Rogue or Warlock would be disgusting. But it's not in those classes, so I gotta say it's a little bit mediocre. You have Eternal Servitude, which discovers a friendly minion that died this game. Pretty powerful. I mean, you have to get at least 4 mana worth of value off this, so even getting like a Injured Blade Master is like decent but not broken. It's a card that's good, but you would have to be playing a very specific type of list that's kind of geared to use it. It's one of those cards where it doesn't fulfill a specific role. It's not going to like gain me life to stop me from getting burned out in the Mage matchup. It's not going to put pressure on against like a Miracle Rogue to kill. I mean, kind of puts pressure on, but it's kind of slow. It's one of those cards in Hearthstone that really is just a decent card, and those are the kinds of cards that tend to not see play. Now, when it comes to the Resurrection effect, I'll say what I said about the original Resurrect when it comes to this card. There might be a time when there's a full Priest combo deck that's not the Silence-based one. A deck that wants to play Gadgets and Auctioneer, or Lyra, and then just pop off. This card is really good for decks like that, because You can basically play your Lyra or your Gadgets in on curve, then let them kill it, and then when you play this, you basically discounted the cost of your combo piece, and then you can kind of go off. So maybe in that kind of deck, it fulfills a core role. You can use it to get extra Radiant Elementals or something, but there isn't really a deck for it right now. I wouldn't expect it to see too much play in the coming metagame. So yeah, chat. It's called Lyra because it's my stream and you can go fuck yourself. All right. Don't call it Lyra like some kind of pleb. Come on. All right, moving on. We got Devourer Mine, which is copy 3 cards in your opponent's deck and add them to your hand. So it's a bigger thought steal. If this card sees play, it will be in a like that Fatigue Priest type of deck I was talking about. 5 mana draw 3 is pretty strong actually, and they're kind of better in multiples because if you've taken like 6 cards from your opponent's deck, you're way more likely to get synergy from the cards that you pulled. It is very slow. Back when I was playing Fatigue Priest a year ago, one of the problems the deck had was that it would always have a full hand anyway. So you're not really... You might not want like a Kabbalist Tome type of effect in this deck, but... Or like a Nourish. But it is powerful. You're getting playable cards out of your opponent's deck. If the Fatigue Priest deck sees play, this card will be a part of it. I guarantee it. So... Yeah, and again, it's just up to the metagame, whether that deck fits, whether it makes sense. I'm definitely going to be streaming it. I'm definitely going to try to build the deck. I think it'd be pretty fun to mess around with, and I think it does have potential. So, but yeah, Devourer Mine, solid. I think that's really the only deck that it fits into, though. Next, you got Embrace Darkness, which is like such a tough card to evaluate. When we saw Entomb, that card was like super easy to evaluate. I was like, okay, well, this thing's playable because it was very straightforward. This card we haven't really seen anything like before. I think, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think this card is very, very good. But I might be completely wrong about that. I'll just make a bold claim, and I'll say I think this card's really strong, and Priest decks will want to play 2 of it. Mind Control is one of the strongest effects in the game. Back when it cost 8 mana, it was like one of the best cards in the game. Now you have a 6 mana version that like forces your opponent to kill their own card. It seems really good to me. Like there are some things that are just so hard to kill as Priest, like Primordial Drake or whatever, and you don't just kill it, you take it. It's not like your opponent can trade into it with their own minions. And if you're playing Embrace Darkness, you're probably not going to have too much of your own board. Like this is not a card you want to play in like Dragon Priest that has a lot of minions in play. And like Talon Priest and stuff. This is a card you want to play in the Fatigue Priest deck, in a Control Priest. But as a removal spell, it seems super powerful. So I think this card's pretty good, actually. Something like Corruption is pretty weak, but this is so different. And it doesn't kill the minion. It exiles it and then puts it and summons one for you, which is just like so gross. It's so good. I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic about this card, but I might be completely wrong about that. We haven't really seen an effect like this before. It's really hard to evaluate, but I think it's one of the better Priest cards in the set, potentially. And then we got Shadow Reaper Anduin, who I'm going to find the hero power for real quick. Let's do Priest, and let's find his hero power. Void Form, hero power, deal 2 damage. After you play a card, refresh this. Cute. So you can burn your opponent out. This is a core part of that Fatigue Priest strategy. It does let you actually out late game something like Jade Druid. You remove all their Jade Idols from their deck with that neutral card, then you play this guy, blow their stuff up. The cool thing with Shadow Reaper Anduin is how well it synergizes with Dragonfire Potion, in my opinion. When your opponent knows you have 2 Dragonfire Potions, they're going to be playing around them by playing like 6 health minions or bigger ones, and then that's when Shadow Reaper comes in and just blows them out. So the combination of those 2 cards, if you're playing 2 Dragonfire Potions and the Shadow Reaper, I think is going to be really powerful. I think the hero power on this is super strong. It's just a good card. Some people are saying they think the ability is kind of situational. I mean, I disagree. I think it's pretty good. It's not just a 3rd Shadow or Death. Like, this is a card that will blow your opponent out sometimes. And, yeah, yeah, I'm a big fan of this card. The artwork's sweet. I look forward to getting a golden one. I think this card's pretty good. So, yep. All right, moving on. Let's do Rouge. First, we got Valeera the Holo, which might have the strongest line of text in Hearthstone, which is gain stealth until your next turn. Is this card better than Uther? Maybe. All I know is gaining stealth is absolutely not okay. Don't think that mechanic should be in the game no matter what cost it's on. It's like, okay, it's the second strongest line of text in the game after Time Warp, which just takes an extra turn. But, this is so stupid. Like, no matter how far behind you are, how do I put this? You, like, reset your hero power. Like, okay, as a rogue, you don't really care what they do on their turn as far as, like, playing minions or drawing cards with their mana or any of that crap. So when you play Valeera, they take their turn, they play their crap. It feels a lot like Frost Novaing them or something. Sure, they kill your minions or whatever if you had any. But then it goes to your turn, right? For 9 mana, you've just basically upgraded your hero power for like 0 mana. Because it's kind of like you took an extra turn. You play your Valeera, your hero power upgrades, which I should pull up, show you what it does. Your hero power becomes insane, and all of a sudden, you can swing the board back from an unlosable or from an unwinnable situation. Sometimes you're just like racing a control mage as well. They're about to burn you out. Now I'm the one that has ice block. It's a hell of a card. I'm really optimistic about Valeera. I think you'll see a lot of play. I'm going to put it in every rogue deck I have to begin with and kind of see where it goes from there. But yeah, during your turn, add a Shadow Reflection to your hand. Basically, you can't have more than one Shadow Reflection at a time. But yeah, Shadow Reflection is each time you play a card, transform this into a copy of it. So you can basically draws you a card a turn as long as you're playing spells and stuff. Yeah, it's powerful. It helps you swing the board back with eviscerates, backstabs, whatever you want, boomerangs. I'm pretty optimistic about Valeera. I think it's a great card. Is it broken? I mean, like, in a vacuum, in an arbitrary sense, yeah, giving yourself stealth is broken. But, I mean, that cost is, like, pretty appropriately balanced, I think. You know, if it costs, like, 8 mana or 7 mana, it would definitely not be okay. But the fact that when you play Valeera, it's pretty much all you can do that turn makes this card a lot more balanced, so... Yeah, you can Mimic Pod into this, you can Blood Thistle into this, I mean, if you're really trying to high roll. Yeah. But yeah, it's a cool card. Yeah. Alright, moving on, we got Lilian Voss, which I think is... I think it's a reference to Liliana from Magic. But yeah, it's a Yeti. Battle Cry, replace spells in your hand with random spells from your opponent's class. So basically, if you're playing a bunch of Razor Petal garbage, this gets way better. If you've stolen unplayable cards with Swashbuckler, you can get different unplayable cards with Lilian. It's a pretty cool card. It's just it has a solid stat line, and it makes you work a little bit to get potentially really good value, and I kind of like that effect. I think it's a card I'm excited to play with. I'll play it in my... you know, my like dedicated steel stuff rogue decks, obviously, but even in just like a miracle rogue that's playing a lot of plant things, this might be playable. I don't think this is enough reason to play the 2 mana rogue card that adds Razor Petals to your hand, but it is definitely a playable card. We'll see if it has a natural home for it. This card in Wild is a lot stronger, because in Wild you're going to get, you know, a lot of spare parts that you can mess around with. Standard's not exactly going to have that, but it still seems solid to me, so I look forward to playing with it, trying to find a home for it. Runeforge Haunter, during your turn, your weapon doesn't lose durability. A 4-mana 5/3 has to do a hell of a lot to be playable. Giving me a weapon charge is not good enough, especially because I expect rogue weapons to be pretty small in most cases. So I don't expect this to really see play anywhere. It doesn't really fit in any deck. Alright, Plague Scientist combo, give a friendly minion poisonous. It's not as bad as it looks, but now that we have Vilespine Hunter, a lot of other cards just kind of pale in comparison. You can use this with like Patches and Southsea Deckhand as like the best combos, but it's probably not quite good enough. It looks pretty good in Arena to me, to be honest. Just for trading up. But yeah, I mean, okay. I think this text just isn't as flashy to people as it should be, you know? Imagine that this card said, combo, give a friendly minion plus 100 attack this turn. Or no, permanently. Give a friendly minion plus 100 attack. It can only attack minions. That's kind of what it says. I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's not constructed playable. We're not going to see much of it, but this card isn't as bad as people say it is, you know. Gonna move on though. Alright, we got Spectral Pillager, which is a 6 mana 5/5, deal damage equal to the number of other cards you've played this turn. This is a card they really had to be careful with, and I think they were a little too careful with it. If this was a 5 mana 5/5, we'd be talking. That would be actually sick. If it was like, if they wanted to make this card real exciting, they should have made it like a 4 mana 1/1. Something like that. This gives you an alternate win condition in a lot of rogue lists, but this particular variation of the card is just too damn expensive, I think. It was so close, man. Like, if it costs 1 mana less, you could do a lot with this card, but it's, I think you just have to do too much work for too little damage for this to ever see play. I think this card's, like, pretty bad in its current state, but, man, the mechanic is really cool. The mechanic is one that feels really natural to Rogue, and I kind of wish that we had a finisher like this for Rogue that kind of felt like Tendrils of Agony in Magic. I think it's like really natural for the class. We got Boomerang, which is one of the cooler card designs in the entire expansion. I really like this design. It's really cool. It's an epic. You throw your weapon, and the weapon returns to your hand. So the first time I read it, I thought it was mediocre, because I thought the weapon that you get back has the same amount of charges it had when it was in play. But it turns out you get all your charges back, but you lose any buffs, like Deadly Poison or something like that. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So Boomerang, the fact that you get to basically, okay, if you have like a 2-charge weapon, right, you kind of get to double attack in a turn. You do your melee with it, and then you do the boomerang hit. So for very little mana, you catch up on the board very quickly, and then you get you don't lose card advantage. You know, you get the weapon back, so there's not really card disadvantage associated with this card. On top of that, that second hit's not costing you any of your life, because it's just Doomerang, whatever. Screw you guys. It's called Doomerang, not Boomerang. But yeah, the second hit isn't costing you life because you're just throwing the weapon at it. You're not attacking it with your face. Really important for Rogue not to lose life. On top of that, this is a 1 mana spell, and 1 mana spells are pretty damn good in Rogue, even if they're a little bit situational and take some work to use. So the only thing about Doomerang that I don't like is that Rogue doesn't really have medium-sized weapons that you want to throw. There is Obsidian Shard, or whatever it's called, the Obsidian, the 4 mana 3/3 weapon that gets cheaper when you play spells from your opponent's class. That weapon's actually really good. It's better than Assassin's Blade. Throwing that is actually really strong with Doomerang. Shadowblade is okay. If you really want to make your Doomerangs work, like, you probably have to play this thing. But yeah, it's basically like the lack of medium-sized weapons are the only thing that might stop this from seeing play. But it's a solid card. It's a cool design. I hope it sees play because it looks fun to play with. Bone Baron, Death Rattle, add 2 1/1 skeletons to your hand. Those skeletons are going to buff your Edwins. You know, if you're playing Spectral Pillager, which you're not, it would buff that. The value is decent, but it's like, again, it's just one of those cards that's like solid, but it's so hard to justify playing a solid card in your deck. A card really has to be just outright busted to see play in Standard today. This card is not outright busted. It's just like decent. So I don't expect it to see constructed play. But it is solid, you know. It's not awful. Got Leeching Poison, give your weapon lifesteal. So this is a super interesting card. There's never been a life gain card in Rogue before, ever. One of the things that I've complained about card design-wise in Hearthstone since the game came out is that the classes don't really have their own class identity. Every class does the same shit, tries to get control of the early game board. Every class has access to the same stuff. The only difference is that only some classes have secrets, and only some classes have weapons, and only some classes had life gain. And every single expansion that comes out, Blizzard is throwing away what little class identity they had left. So I actually thought it was really good design that Rogue didn't have life gain. It made you be careful with your life total. It made the class feel like it had an actual weakness. But now we live in a world with babbling books and swashbucklers and randomly generated garbage, and every class does everything. So, you know, here we go. Final nail in the coffin for class identity in Hearthstone. Leeching Poison. Even though I don't like the card from a game design perspective, it is pretty strong and constructed, I think. When I say pretty strong, I mean like might see play, because if you're playing Obsidian Shard, this is a 9 life gain card for 2 mana, which, even though it's not good value, it is a ability that Rogue has just never had access to. And if you're really trying to do something like beat Mage, you need an effect like this to do that. So I probably, like, okay, to be honest, it's probably never going to see play. It's still worse than like Mistress and Mixtures and stuff. But the fact that like you finally have a life gain card in Rogue, and it's the only one in the class that gains life, means you have to like think about it, you know? Strong isn't the right word, but it's like a the only card in the class that does this. And that makes you really think about whether it'll see play. In some metagames it might. If it's super aggressive, the deck is desperate for life gain, I could see it. Next we got Shadowblade. People were really hyped up about this card. I thought this card was trash when I first saw it, before Boomerang was revealed, because this card is so much worse than Deadly Poison. I would rather, like, okay, Deadly Poison's a 3-mana 3/2 weapon as well. You don't get the immune for 1 turn, but that, I mean, how much life is that really saving you? Like 3 life? Instead, you get way more casting cost flexibility, which in and of itself is worth the 3 life, right? The fact that I can just Hero Power turn 2 and then play Deadly Poison for 1 mana turn 3, that's already way better than paying 3 mana for a 3/2 weapon. I would, just for that, splitting up the casting cost, I would lose the 3 life that I gain off this thing. But on top of that, Deadly Poison's a 1 mana spell, so it has synergy with all your combo cards like Vile Spine, SI Agent. It has synergy with Gadgetzin Auctioneer. It's easier to pop off with like Sharazin and things like that. Lilian Voss can replace it if it's bad. Like, Shadowblade is so much worse than Deadly Poison, and Deadly Poison isn't good enough to see play right now. So I really thought this card was overhyped for a long time, but now they revealed Boomerang, and Boomerang requires you to have a weapon, basically, because you don't want to be throwing Deadly Poison, because then you get back a 1 mana 1/2 dagger, and who wants that? That's garbage. Getting back a Shadowblade, though, is pretty decent. So maybe just because of Boomerang, Shadowblade sees play. I'm kind of on the fence on it. I mean, it's not the worst card ever, but, you know, it's not great. Definitely overhyped. Alright. So, moving on. One sec. Moving on, we got Roll the Bones. Draw a card. If it has Death Rattle, cast it again. There's so many ways to get good value in Rogue now. You have a Mimic Pod, which is great value and can get you 2 Valeeras sometimes. You have Shaku, you have Razor Petal 2/2 guy. You just have so many things that provide you random sources of value. Shadowcaster if you want it. Like, Roll the Bones, you have to be playing a Death Rattle heavy deck, which already has a lot of value in and of itself, and then you're playing a card for 2 mana that doesn't affect the board, that will cycle on average and maybe draw 2 cards like a third of the time or like half the time at most. This is just not good enough to see play. If you're playing a Death Rattle heavy Rogue deck, you would much rather be playing something that gives you card advantage while also affecting the board at the same time, like Shadowcaster. But if you're playing a minion heavy deck, you don't want to spend 2 mana to just not affect the board. That's just really weak. So don't expect this to see too much play. That's it for Rogue. And we're going to go on to Shaman. So Drakari Defender. I think the overload on this is just way too much. This ends up being like a 6 mana 2/8 taunt, which is just awful. if there were like a lot of lava shocks in the game and Eternal Sentinels and stuff in Standard, I just, even then, I'm really skeptical because you couldn't do it on curve. Right? You play this turn 3, and then on turn 4, you only have 1 mana. So I don't think Drakari Defender is very playable. If you're playing against aggro, there's so many better tools in Shaman. Volcano, Maelstrom Portal, Lightning Storm, Heal or Hot Spring Guardian, like Jinyu. You have so many better anti-aggro tools than this guy. I just don't expect him to ever see play, even with the giant guy being in the game. Got Ice Fishing, wanting us to draw 2 Murlocs from the deck. So in a traditional Murloc deck that's trying to just curve out with animals and then kill you, this card is not that good. But Shaman Murlocs play kind of differently than Paladin Murlocs. You're not always trying to just swarm the board. They're, because of the Shaman quest and because of the Shaman spell that makes 4 Murlocs, Ice Fishing can kind of fit into this control Murloc Paladin deck. I don't know how else to describe the archetype, but basically, like, you play the quest turn 1, and then you just kind of kill stuff for a while, right? And then you're not trying to play 10 little Murlocs to trigger the quest. You're just trying to draw your spell that summons 4 of them, and then like another one that summons 4 of them, and then like 1 Ice Fishing, and then you're done. Or like Finja, and then activate Finja, or Ice Fishing gets you Finja, you know? You're playing very few Murlocs and very few Murloc generating cards, but the ones that you do draw make multiple Murlocs, and you're basically using the Murloc quest to pop off in the late game. So Ice Fishing is maybe playable in an archetype like that. In a traditional, like, aggressive Shaman deck, I don't think you want to be spending 2 mana in order to draw 2 Murlocs. Yeah, so I'm kind of interested in how consistently this lets you get Finja in play on turn 5. That's definitely something worth thinking about because Finja's insane. But yeah, overall, not too hyped on this card. I'm not going to say it's like broken or anything, but I'm saying if it sees play, it's not going to be in like an aggressive Murloc deck. It's going to be in more the combo-oriented one, I think, or like the quest-oriented one. We got Voodoo Hexer, which is just a pretty solid dude, whether you're playing freeze or not. Now, whether you want a card like this in a mid-rangey type of Shaman deck, I don't know. We haven't really had a solid 5-drop for the deck ever since Azure Drake rotated out. The ability is definitely powerful. The stat line is decent. Card has potential, but the other ice synergy cards in the set aren't too powerful, so that alone will probably make this card not see too much play. So the card itself in a vacuum is pretty good. Like, it's pretty decent. But I think the things like Icebreaker aren't quite strong enough to make me want to play this in a Shaman deck. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't know. There's Burlock, though. This card's kind of good, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to play these things together, probably. Playing Ice Murlocs just seems like a weird strategy. I don't think it's a thing. But yeah, moving on, we got Thrall Deathseer. We revealed this one on TempestStorm.com. Pretty great website that I found. You guys should check that out on your free time for all of your Hearthstone needs. Thrall is kind of like a third copy of Bloodlust in a token Shaman deck. But instead of killing your opponent, he gives you value, which is way better than giving you lethal. So for those of you guys that don't know his hero power, it is 2 mana, evolve a minion twice. Wait, no, it's not. It's evolve once. I should double check. I think it's evolve once. Let's find it quick. Yep, evolve it once. It costs 1 more. But yeah, he double evolves on the battle cry, which is pretty good. Thrall is a card that I think you'll obviously play in that token Shaman deck, although I don't think you'll make too many changes to the deck outside of playing this guy. There aren't any other auto-includes from Shaman for that list. You probably just throw this guy in and then keep like 29 of the other cards the same. It is powerful, it is a good card, but it's kind of pigeonholed into this one strategy that you play it in. And in that deck, he's very good, but he's not like some ubiquitous card that you throw into every single Shaman list, probably. Anything mid-rangey, It's going to take some games to really figure out how good this is exactly, but it might be just like insane in matchups like Control. Like, I do think the metagame will be slower just because of how many good late game tools this expansion had. This is exactly the kind of card you want for going over the top of Control strategies. Because not only are you getting infinite value, but that value is killing them by giving you like bigger dudes. We'll see. I think it has potential. I think it will definitely see play in the token Shaman deck. We'll see if it sees play in any other type of Shaman list, depending on what those decks look like after the expansion. So, yeah. We got Snow Fury Giant, which is like, I don't know, maybe like the worst Giant in the game. I don't know, like him or Clockwork. I don't know. I think the casting cost on this card is kind of interesting because it's the only 11 mana minion in the game. So for evolves and devolves on 10 and 12 mana cards, this guy will start coming up. But as far as just like playing him unironically in your deck list on purpose, probably not the best decision. I think that the cost on this guy is just ridiculous. There's no way that he's going to be good. Like, I'd rather play Sea Giant. I'd rather pay 4 mana for my 7/7 than 11 mana for my 8/8, you know? This guy's just not going to get cost reduced enough to be worth it, I think. By the time he's cheap, it's going to be so late in the game, you'd rather just draw Burn than this guy. So, even in Wild, I'm not that impressed by this guy. I really don't see him being that strong, so unimpressed by that card. Avalanche is a really cool one. It's another example of new types of counterplay in Hearthstone. A card like Meteor, for example, I really enjoyed because it made the opponent play in a different way around that card to make it less effective. And I think that's just really good gameplay for almost any game. And when Blizzard finds new ways to incorporate it into Hearthstone, it kind of increases the skill ceiling a little bit. So like if Avalanche becomes a ubiquitous card, then people who play Hearthstone enough at a high level will kind of know to position their minions around Avalanche. And yeah, the way you position your minions around this card is different than you do against other cards, and yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, freeze a minion, 3 damage to adjacent ones. Yeah, you basically want the big dudes on the side in this case. I am not too impressed with this card. We've seen multi-shot before, which is like okay, but not really a competitive card. Avalanche is a little bit better. The fact that freezing does buy you a lot of time against big minions is interesting if you're playing like a very control-oriented Shaman deck and you're just trying to buy time before you play Volcano. This could be pretty interesting. It's good with Halazeal, gains you 6 life. Like, those synergies might matter, you know? There's definitely a lot of spell-heavy Shaman decks out there, and just having access to like one more AoE spell or removal spell, it warrants like some discussion or some thought. It could see play for sure. I'm not like insanely impressed by it though, and I don't think it's going to be an auto-include in anything. You got Icebreaker, which is actually one of the better payoffs for being like a freeze-oriented deck. Pretty much the only payoff besides Meraki. The fact that you can kill 3 minions is pretty tempting. I really wish this was like a 1/4 weapon. I don't think it would have been too good if it was that cost. But yeah, it's a cool mechanic. I like the thought here. I wish it was like a 2-mana weapon, or I wish that it had an extra point of durability. Or sorry, Murabi, not Meraki. But yeah, Icebreaker's interesting. I don't think this card is enough to justify playing all the freeze cards in your Shaman deck. I think I'd rather just play cards that are good on their own. But it's so close, man. If this was one number better, like one cost cheaper or one more durability, this would have been super powerful. As is, though, it's still a little too weak, I think. Cryostasis, it's a cute kind of decision-oriented card. You see a lot of these in card games where you can like buff your guy, but he kind of gets a drawback, or like then you can use it on their guy too. It's got a lot of flexibility. Unfortunately, every outcome is like really bad. You don't want to buff their guy to freeze it. You don't want to freeze your guy to buff it. All the options just are kind of bad. So I don't think the flexibility really makes up for that. I don't expect to see a lot of cryostasis. And yeah, I just don't really think this is going to be a very commonly played card. Burlock is pretty cool. I mean, it's Glacial Shard for 1 more mana, 1 more health, and it freezes an enemy and has Murloc tag. So it's the Murloc tag is probably the more valuable part of this. There haven't been too many insane 2-drop Murlocs printed outside of Rockpool Hunter, so it's possible we start seeing this guy get played. He does give you a decent amount of board control, or helps with it at least. I mean, I like the card. I think if like Icebreaker was better, something like this becomes more of an auto-include in decks, but as is, I just don't really expect it to see too much play. You can Ice Fish for it pretty reliably. I don't know if that'll really matter. Yeah, I really don't see a deck or a strategy where this is easy to slot in, or where it really makes sense to include. So I don't expect to see too much Burlock moving forward, but it's not awfully statted. It's like passable. It's on that fringe level of playable, but I don't expect to see much of it. Murabi is the non-Icebreaker reason to play a freeze Shaman deck. So whenever another minion's frozen, add a copy of it to your hand. There's a very slow way of getting value, because his stats are so bad, you need to basically freeze things the same turn you play him. So you're playing him on like 9 mana or 10 mana. What are you freezing stuff with? Like Burlock? Are you playing Glacial Chasm in your deck? I mean, to me, it looks like a bad card that wants you to play other bad cards in your deck. And that's kind of the hallmark of a card that's not really going to see play ever. I would dust this guy the second you open him. Well, actually, when you open him, wait to finish opening your packs so you don't open a second one, and then disenchant him. But yeah, I think this card's pretty awful, so I don't expect it to see much play. Maybe if we had Frost Nova. All right. Let's move on to Warlock. Let's see if Blizzard can dig this class out of the dumpster. Whew. All right. Let's start with Gnome Feratu. This card is garbage. A lot of other people will have explained why it's garbage, but yeah, in a nutshell, this is the kind of effect that really hypes up new players and casual players every time. They're like, oh my god, remove the top card of your opponent's deck, it's so powerful. And then the people that like understand math or card games will be like, well, no, it's River Crocolisk. And yeah, like playing with 1 card smaller deck does not like hurt your opponent on average. Removing the top card of your opponent's deck is no different statistically than removing the bottom card of their deck. It is functionally just River Crocolisk. Even in a control matchup, I would rather play like another finisher instead of a River Crocolisk that mills them. So if combo decks become really popular, or if like a 2-mana 2/3, by the way, has never been better in Hearthstone than it is now. Like River Crocolisk is actually good stats on turn 2 right now. So maybe, just maybe, there's like a 1% chance that every single deck in Standard, there's like Pirate Warrior, and then there's like 9 control decks. Maybe that's the metagame. And in that metagame, maybe we play Gnome Feratu. But man, I'm just super skeptical about this guy. I don't expect us to see a lot of play. I'd recommend just dusting him if you open him, and or her. And yeah, I think the card's pretty awful. So, but it is interesting. We've never had an effect that does that before in the game. So, we'll see how it goes. All right, moving on. We got Despicable Dreadlord. It's another Frozen Pwn card that we revealed. This card's nuts. It's one of the better Warlock cards revealed in the expansion. You're going to play 2 copies of it in all of your Blood Reaver Gul'dan decks. It's excellent stats for, well, not the stats aren't excellent for the cost, but the stats plus the ability altogether, plus the fact that it's a demon, makes it kind of the complete package. It's a card that just helps you take control of the board, snowballs that control if it happens to live. It's just powerful. It's good to resurrect later. It's a great card. So if you plan on playing Warlock, I definitely think controlling or like mid-rangey Warlock is the future, and this card will be a core part of that. So definitely recommend you play that. Battlecry, destroy a friendly minion and gain 2/2. The reason Zoo is bad right now is that it can't keep a minion in play because every other deck has early game weapons. Like, how do you beat N'Zoth's First Mate pulling patches, or how do you beat Jade Claw as a Zoo deck? You can't, and this card does not help with that. So, you know, in a wild Zoo deck with Nerubian Eggs and Haunted Creepers and stuff, like, then we're talking. Then this card's like seriously strong. But in Standard, no. This is not quite there yet. If we had a few more egg type of effects, we might get there. Unwilling Sacrifice, choose a friendly minion, destroy it, and a random enemy minion. So the nice part about this card is that the friendly minions you're destroying are coming from a Warlock deck, so they're probably garbage. And you're destroying more playable cards. But it's a random destruction, not a targeted one. 3 mana is really just too much to pay for killing a big minion. I mean, we saw how mediocre Mulch was. I mean, Mulch saw a lot of play, but it was like, it was just decent, and that was with much less bad of a drawback and targeted removal, and in a class that really wanted hard removal a lot more than Warlock does. So, if Mulch was like only solid, this card is never going to be good. It's just, this really should be targeted destruction. It's disappointing that it's not. I guess with the user interface, that would be too tough to coordinate. You'd have to like target an arrow and then target another arrow. Blizzard really wants like one swipe to basically aim all your cards, so it kind of helps with that. But yeah, this card's just bad. I don't expect Unwilling Sacrifice to see much play. Bad. Drain Soul. 2 mana Drain Life. Love this card. I think it has a lot of potential. Like I said, Lifesteal completely changes in value depending on the class you're talking about. In Priest or Paladin, this card is unplayable. In Warlock, I think it's pretty good. Gaining life is so sick. It's something that, like I said, if Antique Healbot was in Standard, Warlock Control would be a tier 1 deck. No joke. We don't have Antique Healbot, but maybe if we play enough things like Drain Soul and Mistress of Mixtures, maybe if we combine enough of those things together, we end up with a solid deck. One of the reasons that Drain Soul is pretty strong, or one of the reasons it will see play that you guys might not be thinking about, is the fact that Defile is the best Warlock card in Standard, maybe in the game. Well, it's not as good as Void Caller, but this card's dumb. Like, this card's so dumb. This is probably the best card in Standard for Warlock, at least. And the reason Drain Soul is better is because it gives you one more way to manipulate the health of your opponent's stuff. So if my opponent has like a 1 health minion and a 4 health minion, which is like, you know, pretty common, all of a sudden I can go Drain Soul Defile, and I kill his 1 health minion and his 4 health minion and his like 3 health minion on top of that, you know. So Drain Soul is just another thing that lets you kind of shoot a minion for some damage, which all of a sudden matters a lot more because of Defile being in the game. Next, we got Howl Fiend. Whenever this minion takes damage, discard a random card. A lot of people are firing shots at this. I really don't think it's that bad. You really do want your Zoo deck to be very all-in, and this card does accomplish that. You have your Darkshire Councilman, which is definitely going to be your like default 3-drop, but this guy's playable in and of himself. Yeah, discarding sucks, but you get a lot of stats up front. Like the fact that he's a 3/6, that's like so much better than a 3/5, and a 3/5 is already good. I think this card is way better than people are giving it credit for. I think that just like things like Defile being in the game probably means that Zoo's going to struggle, but man, Howl Fiend is really not that bad. Am I saying that it'll see play? Well, probably not, because Zoo probably won't see play because N'Zoth's First Mate and Jade Claw are in the game. But most people, when they see Howl Fiend, they're like, oh, it makes me discard my hand, this card's garbage, which is a really bad way of thinking about it. Like, if N'Zoth's First Mate and Jade Claw were not in Standard, this card would see a lot of play because Zoo would be nuts. So, yeah, I think this card's better than people are giving it credit for, but it's probably not enough to make Zoo see play. Zoo really needed a little bit more help against those early game weapons. Next we got Defile, which, like I said, best Warlock card in Standard probably. This card's absolutely disgusting. It's flexible. It's almost impossible to play around because of just how good it is at killing everything. It kills everything, man, and it costs 2 mana. I don't know what more I can say about this card. Like, it's fantastic. Craft 2 of it for the love of God if you plan on playing Warlock. I mean, I don't think you play it in aggro, but man, in control, this card is stupid. Absolutely stupid. I think this card's fantastic. Like, your Paladin opponent might not be able to, like, hero power again against Warlock, you know? So, yeah, that's pretty good. The site I'm using is just the official Blizzard site, for those of you guys asking, by the way. But yeah. Alright, next we got Treachery. Choose a friendly minion and give it to your opponent. It's an awfully mean thing to do, giving your opponent Warlock cards. Isn't this the same exact name as Magic's Treachery card? Oh, no. Treachery is the steal on tap. There's a Magic card that... whatever. There's a 3-mana Magic card that did this too. What was it, like Donate? I think it was called Donate. Yeah, Donate Bargain or something. Yeah, Donate. Anyway, Treachery, it's a card that people look at and they're like, wow, this card's garbage. Until it's not, right? This is a really fun card to have in the game because at some point there's going to be a combo that makes this pretty powerful. Like something with a really strong battle cry and a really bad death rattle. Something like Darnassus Aspirant or Bomb Lobber. I mean, not Bomb Lobber, Bomb Squad or Doomsayer. Like, these are just mediocre combos that exist now, but later on there's going to be a really powerful one. And once that's in the game, then we have a I don't know, pretty interesting card. It's one of those effects where you just keep this in mind every time a new expansion comes out. And as more and more cards get revealed, we'll see Treachery doing some crazy things down the line. So, Blood Queen is the next one. I'm going to give my voice a break for a second. Doomsayer Treachery is not better than Doomsayer Frost Nova. The biggest reason Doomsayer Frost Nova is good is that they blow up on your turn, so you get the initiative. If you Doomsayer Treachery, then they are the first person to play more stuff on the table. It's way worse. It's more guaranteed to go off, so it's better in some scenarios, but worse when it does blow up. Yeah, Doomsayer Nova makes them, when it works, not only do you get initiative, which is the most important thing, but it also makes them skip their turn. Alright. So everyone's subbing and donating. I'm going to thank all of you guys as soon as the review is over. Right now I have my alerter turned off because I'm putting this on YouTube. So, Alright, so next we got Blood Queen Lanathel. 5 mana, 1/6 lifesteal, has 1 attack for each card you've discarded this game. So in the aggressive Zoo deck that plays all of the discard garbage, including Howlfiend, which will be a deck, probably tier 3, but maybe tier 2. In that deck, you will play Blood Queen Lanathel. Will she be broken? No. But she's good enough to put in the deck, and if her stats suck and she would be bad, you just discard her, and you don't feel bad about it. The right way to look at this card is kind of like a third copy of Doomguard that is slightly worse and slightly better sometimes, where you kind of want to top deck it after you've emptied your hand, and you know, have a decently statted thing to plop on the table. Getting even a like 3 attack on this thing is pretty powerful, at least against aggro. Against control, it's going to be a lot worse. I don't like, this is my main thing I don't like about this card. It might actually not even be good enough in a discard deck. The main thing I don't like about this card is that the discard Warlock deck will never be a control deck. It has to be aggro. Because aggro is the only deck that wants to play Malchezaar's Imp, that wants to play Silverware Golem, that wants to play Doomguard. You don't want to play a discard control Warlock. It's just not a thing. So, in an aggro deck, you don't want to play a medium-sized lifesteal minion. If this thing is like a 5/6, you got lucky. And that's a pit fighter. That's like a neutral minion that you wouldn't play in your deck. So, the fact that lifesteal is something that's ignored by your control opponent makes Blood Queen a lot less attractive. Because the deck she's going into is aggressive, and an aggressive deck doesn't really want this effect. So, just because of that, I'm not too impressed by this. You know, 2 more expansions of them forcing this mechanic down our throats, and eventually we'll have a discard deck that we want to complain about. I think Blizzard's kind of getting a little too cute with trying to make the discard mechanic good, though. All they needed to do was take Succubus and just flip its stats to a 3/4, and then boom, Discard Zoo is a good deck. That's all I needed to do, is change one number on one card, and they made it a tier 2 deck. And instead, they're just going to keep releasing trash after trash until we have so much trash that all of it will work together. Kind of like Totem Shaman. At the end of the day, none of the trash matters except for the Totem Golem. And it'll be so dominant, they'll nerf everything before touching the Totem Golem. Yeah. Oh well. Is what it is. Alright. Blood Reaver Gul'dan. So, summon all friendly minions that died this game. Wow. It's very slow. Warlock is now the only class that has like 2 heroes you can play. Between Jiraxis and this guy. The hero power on this guy is a 2 mana, deal 3, gain 3 life. Fantastic hero power, one of the best. 10 mana is a lot, but you're already going to want to be playing Despicable Dreadlord in this deck. You're already going to want to be playing Abyssal Enforcers in this deck. Did I say all minions? Yeah, I meant demons. This is a, yeah, it's a good card. It's a card that will, you know, top off your curve in that control Warlock deck. Do you want more late game than Jiraxis? Nobody really knows yet, but it is powerful. I don't know how Jiraxis and this card interact. Like, if I play Jiraxis, if I have this in play and I play Jiraxis on top of it, I think I'm just Jiraxis. But if I play Jiraxis first and then I play this on top of it, I think do I keep the fist and, like, change the hero power and then I'm at, like, 15 plus 5 armor? I don't really know how it works. Regardless, I don't think it really matters. It's not really going to affect the card's playability. But, yeah, it's a great finisher for a control Warlock list. You can play it with Cruel if you're playing a Kazakus type of strategy. But yeah, it's powerful. It's a good finisher for that kind of deck. And the Defile that's keeping you alive, the Despicable Dreadlord that's keeping you alive, this is the payoff. This is what you're trying to stay alive to play. So, alright. So, moving on, we got Warrior. I mean, overall, you know, is Warlock high tier now? You'd be surprised how little it takes. Between the neutral life gain cards and then Defile, that might be all Warlock was missing. Who knows? It'll be interesting to see. But yeah, moving on to Warrior. So Warrior is super interesting this expansion because I think Tempo Warrior is going to be a pretty strong deck. We got Rot Face, which is an absolute garbage tier 8 mana 4/6. The stats suck, the cost sucks, the ability sucks. You can't even play it on 8 mana unless you have Inner Fire. This card's trash. Disenchant it. We'll never see play for any reason ever. Yeah. And it's ugly. Alright. Moving on, we got Valkyr, Soul Claimer. So, this is a 3 mana 1/4. Whenever this minion survives damage, summon a 2/2 ghoul. This is going to be a core 3-drop in your Tempo Warrior deck. The only issue is you already have so many 3-drops you want to play. You want to play Frothing Berserker. You want to play Acolyte of Pain. You want to play Valkyr Soul Claimer. You want to play Ravaging Ghoul. Guys, I'm sorry I called it ugly. I apologize, Raw Face. You're beautiful on the inside. Rot Face made you. I don't know. Valkyr Soul Claimer is pretty solid, though. I think card has a lot of potential. I think I will just play all the 3-drops in Tempo Warrior and just see what happens. You never want to keep a 3-drop in that deck, just because you're always going to draw it, but yeah, so that's decent. Even with the Warrior hero power, Rotface isn't better. But yeah, Soul Claimer, pretty solid. I like the card, and yeah, I'll be playing it in the Tempo deck for sure. Dead Man's Hand, shuffle a copy of your hand into your deck. So, you know, for the Fatigue Warrior deck, in theory, you can play 2 of these and go infinite, and that's kind of cute. But do you really want to play 2 dead cards that do nothing outside of Fatigue matchups just to go infinite in a Warrior deck when you can play something like Sulfuras to just end the game pretty quick anyway? It's really tough to justify the Fatigue plan over traditional Taunt Warrior kills. But, you know, maybe if you're shuffling in the gain 10 life thing and then you're like drawing cards somehow, I don't know. I don't think this will see too much play. I think even the Fatigue Priest deck will out late game this because you can just Benedictus against Dead Man's Hand. See, I'm not too optimistic about this. I expect Dead Man's Hand to not really see too much play, but it is a very cool effect. It's very flashy. It's exciting, and you know, if there weren't so many issues with traditional Control Warrior being in Standard right now, this might see a lot of play, but not quite there. Call Rotface, he's crying. All right, then we got Animated Berserker, which is like exactly what Tempo Warrior wanted. A good 1-drop, good stats, good ability. I kind of miss Sir Finley, but this one's good too. It's a fantastic 1-drop. They're definitely going to make Tempo Warrior a thing, thanks to this 1-drop mostly and the weapon. And then, you know, the 3-drop helps, but he wasn't necessary. But yeah, great card. I expect to play this a lot in that deck. You're not going to be playing it in Pirate Warrior. You're not going to be playing it in Control Warrior. It is purely for your dedicated Enraged Tempo Warrior type of list. It might be one of the first decks I build on stream. Should be pretty fun. So, all right, next we got Mountain Fire Armor. Death Rattle, if it's your opponent's turn, gain 6 armor. Gaining 6 armor is something you really want to do in a control deck. A control deck playing a 3-mana 4/3 is a little tough to justify. It is so hard for your opponent to ignore this card, though. The fact that I can trade into whatever I want, the fact that I can just go face against like a Freeze Mage, I think they will have to kill it if I play it turn 3. The only issue is if you play it later, that's when they'll start ignoring it. Mountain Fire Armor, I think, is a card that's going to take a lot of experimentation with to figure out if it is good or not. But it's one of the stronger examples of that type of counterplay that I was talking about earlier with the Paladin 4-drop, where your opponent has to make decisions on their turn. You have to make decisions about how you trade with it. It creates this interesting like board tension, and it's a card that is stronger the earlier you play it and the earlier that you draw it. Because on turn 3, they're forced to kill it. They can't let it live. So, you know, a 3-mana 4/3 gain 6 armor on turn 3 is a pretty good card. You can compare that to Shield Maiden. Alright, next we got Blood Razor, which is one of the best warrior weapons ever made. Probably the 3rd best warrior weapon ever made, which is impressive considering the other 2 are like the 2 best in the game. Death's Bite and Fiery War Axe. Blood Razor is damn good. It's really going to encourage you to play more Whirlwind Synergy cards. This card is absolutely fantastic. I'm excited to play with it. I think it's very powerful. You'll play it in Control. You'll play it in the Tempo Warrior. You won't play it in Pirate Warrior. And you'll be drawing this card a whole lot because you have Forge of Souls, which is a card we're going to talk about pretty soon that will draw you this like every game. So, very good card. One of the biggest reasons that Tempo Warrior gets stronger besides the 1-drop. And yeah, look forward to playing it now. Is Deathbite better than War Axe? Yeah, of course. Deathbite's the best weapon in the game. I've said that since it was released. Since before it was in the game, actually, when I did my site review, I think. Then we actually got Death Revenant. It's a 5-mana 3/3 battle cry, gain 1/1 for each damaged minion. This card is hot garbage. I don't want to play fat vanilla statted things in this game. It does curve off of Blood Razor pretty well, which is cute. But when I attack with Blood Razor, I want that Whirlwind to kill minions and not let them stay alive. So don't expect us to see play ever. I think the card's terrible. I don't even know what I'm looking at in the artwork. Is this its face? Is this its face? Who knows? Never going to look at it again outside of disenchanting it. Let's look at Forge of Souls. Now, Forge of Souls, this is an exciting card. It's a 2-mana draw 2, and it's even better than a 2-mana draw 2, because you're drawing Fiery War Axe every game. You can coin Forge of Souls on turn 1 and have Fiery War Axe turn 2, like most of the time. That's insane. That's actually insane. It's a 2-mana draw spell that you can justify keeping in your opening hand. You're going to be Blood Razoring on turn 4 all the time. You're going to be Fiery War Axing on turn 3 all the time. It's nuts. I'm going to play 2 of this in Tempo Warrior, I think. I might play a Gorehowl just so that it's like more consistent for me to be able to play this card, because I just think it's so strong. I love this card. Maybe you only play 1 of it because you don't want to play too many weapons, but I mean, come on, it's so good. You draw 2 cards. I don't know. I like this card a lot. At the very least, you'll play it as a 1 of, but that's, even though you're playing 1 of it, it doesn't mean it's not broken. It just means like, it's like Patch is broken, you know? Like, you only play 1 of it, but man, that 1 copy makes a big deal when you draw it. Yeah, I think Forge of Souls is pretty damn good. Mostly because this card's stupid good, and Fiery War Axe is stupid good, so. Alright, Amaz called this card garbage. I would like to refer all of you to my stream title right now. Nobody gives a fuck what other streamers said, chat. Their reviews don't matter. Alright, moving on, we got Scourge Lord Garrosh. Sweet. The Scourge Lord Garrosh is one of the weaker Death Knights, but definitely not bad. The hero power is Whirlwind, for those of you guys that don't know. 2 mana, Whirlwind. Battlecry equip a 4/3 Shadowmourne that also damages adjacent minions. That's pretty powerful. I mean, you have to take some face damage, but that's a Flame Strike every turn. It's a hell of a card. I think that in the Tempo Warrior deck, it is definitely a card you want to be playing. Just having an endless stream of Whirlwinds for the rest of the game is going to mean that you have an insane amount of synergy. You can start popping off with battle rages, draw your deck. It's a very powerful card. And the card Whirlwind itself might not be a card that you want to play 2 of anymore in Tempo Warrior. Because you have so many other effects that do it better, like Blood Razor, Ravaging Ghoul, Scourge Lord Garrosh. Just having this guy in play means your Gromosh is going to be able to get enraged for the rest of the game. He hits for 12 damage to the face if you want to do that. I mean, this card's strong. It'll get you board control. It'll kill your opponent slowly. It doesn't kill them very well, but it does some damage. And yeah, just a solid card. I don't think you'll play this in like a dedicated control warrior. That's kind of the difference here. I think that the warrior hero power is one of the strongest things it has going for it in a control shell. So in a control list, you might not play it, but in Tempo Warrior, this card's great. In Taunt Warrior, it's also probably not the... That's probably also not the deck for this guy. So he's kind of niche. He has to go in this one specific type of mid-rangey warrior deck, but in that deck, he's a very good card. So I do expect him to see play in Tempo Warrior because the rest of Tempo Warrior looks pretty damn strong. And finally, we got Bring It On, gain 10 armor, reduce the cost of cards in your opponent's hand by 2. We have a lot of armor-giving tools already. I would rather play like Mountain Fire armor in a random control deck than this thing to begin with. It can be strong. The drawback isn't that bad, reducing the cost of minions in your opponent's hand. But let's imagine a world where it just gained 10 armor and then it had no more text. Is that a card I would play in my deck? Like, honestly, maybe not. I don't know if it's good enough to play a 2-mana gain 10 armor card. We already have like Healing Touch, and that card's not good enough in Druid, or like Feral Rage, which is like only good enough because you can also do attack with it. A pure armor gaining card for 10 armor, 2 mana, I don't know if that'd be good enough. And then this has a pretty big drawback on top of that where I can't like play it on curve. So it's not that big of a drawback. Your opponent's not really going to want to play into your brawl in a lot of cases. But yeah, at the end of the day, I just don't know if 2 mana gain 10 armor is good enough because it doesn't cycle. It doesn't give you board presence. It doesn't do anything besides gain you that armor, you know. If every deck in the metagame became burn heavy and you really needed the life gain, then maybe, but that's just not the case right now. So, but yeah, overall, excited for Tempo Warrior. I expect that to come into the meta pretty strong and might be a tier 1 deck. All right, let's go to the neutrals. We got Snow Flipper Penguin, who is going to do nothing except buff your Rexar Death Knight Beasts by a 1/1. As long as you can discover him, it's actually pretty good. He just automatically makes the stats on whatever minion you get pretty good. Battlecry summon 2/1/1 skeletons. This card is, you can kind of compare it to the Dragonling mechanic, I think it's called. It summons it's a 2/4 that summons a 2/1. This card's better because you get 2 bodies. It makes a little bit more sense for token decks, but a card needs to be a lot better than this in order to see playing constructed nowadays. So, again, not going to be seen competitively. Give adjacent minions 2 health. I mean, it is technically a 5/8 if you get the full value on it, but you're not going to get the full value on it. You already need to have board control. If you already have board control, you'd rather play a different 5-drop that just kills your opponent. Giving stuff extra health is cute, but it's not really broken, and it needs to be broken to see playing constructed. I gotta sneeze. Alright. Rattling Rascal. This card's adorable. Battlecry, summon a 5/5 skeleton. Death Rattle, summon 1 for your opponent. Ah! Very cool. So this is the card that you want to play with Treachery. I haven't seen this one before. It's actually kind of interesting because you guarantee that your big skeleton is going to get to attack first. That's a 4-mana 7/7. I kind of like this card. And Silence Priest? I'm thinking just in like Pirate Warrior. What if you just play this card in Pirate Warrior? You already have the board. They've already used the removal trying to kill your stuff. Turn 4 comes around. They're praying you don't have Kor'kron Elite. And then you play 4-mana 7/7. Evolve Shaman. Yeah, in Evolve it's really good. It's good with like Shadow Step, if that's a thing. It's not that good with Shadow Step. It's okay. This card has a lot of potential. That's a really powerful effect. And even when you play it completely fairly, like without any shenanigans, you play the card and you just pass the turn. You have a 4-mana 7/7. And sure, they kill the 2/2 and they get a 5/5, but your 5/5 still gets to attack first. So for like a very aggressive deck, this still could be pretty powerful. I don't know, that's a lot of stats for very little mana. I'm kind of optimistic about this card. This will see play in some way at some point, even if it's not immediately in this coming metagame. Yeah, Purify, that's right. Yeah, Skulking Geist, which had a lot of hype around it. It's a pretty interesting tech card against Jade Druid. Depending on how big of a role Jade Druid ends up playing in the metagame, you know, this will see play as like a 1-of tech card in the fatigue-oriented decks, or the control-oriented decks. Having played a lot of Taunt Warrior versus Jade Druid, it rarely, like, it doesn't come down to cycling infinite Jade Idols as often as you would think. So it's possible that this won't see play in Taunt Warrior, but it would see play in like a Fatigue Warrior. But maybe Fatigue Warrior is just a bad deck to begin with. I guess, from my perspective, I don't know why there was so much hype around this card. I think it's good that there's an answer in the game for Jade Idol. I think it's really good. But this is like a very mediocre answer, and it affects, like, this is a card you would only play as a 1-of in a couple very niche decks, and it's only good in one very niche matchup. So it's not that big of, it's not going to have that big of an impact on the metagame, you know? I like that your deck has an answer for Jade Idol now. If you're playing like a really slow, grindy control deck, like I'll probably play this in that Priest deck I was talking about that I want to try. But yeah, overall it's not that important that this thing exists, you know? But I'm glad it does. I'm glad that there's an answer to that card. So we'll see. Next we got Happy Ghoul. Now this card has a ton of potential. 0-mana 3/3s are powerful as hell. Every time people look at this card, they're like, oh man, it's the Priest 2-drop. Except it's not really a Priest 2-drop ever. Think about how Hearthstone works, right? An expansion comes out, people build a bunch of garbage decks, Tempo Storm releases a meta snapshot. Everyone copies it and knows each other's decks. And then there's different meta snapshots from Tempo Storm, from worse websites, all around the internet. People are just copying shit all the time, from streams, from everything. So in a world where Happy Ghoul becomes ubiquitous in Priest decks, nobody is going to attack Priest on turn 1 in the face. If you know that every Priest deck has Happy Ghoul, you're not going to attack them in the face and let them heal themselves. Ever. So you have to think about this card in the context of like other classes in a lot of ways. I don't think the 2-mana, the turn 2 Happy Ghoul is going to be very common, but I think in something like Paladin, if I'm playing True Silver Champion, holy crap, that synergy is strong. Imagine you play True Silver Champion and you kill your... Okay, it's turn 3. You coin, you play True Silver Champion. You hit your opponent's minion. And they've attacked you at this point for whatever reason. Now, you play Happy Ghoul, you play a second Happy Ghoul, you play a Dread Corsair, you play another Dread Corsair. I mean, even just like 2 of the 0-mana 3/3s. I mean, your opponent's dead. All it took was a True Silver, and you just played like 6 power for 0 mana. That's disgusting. Oh, and by the way, your hand is empty, so you just Divine Favor next turn. 0 mana cards a lot of potential in strategies like that, I think. But for like outside of aggressive decks, it's not going to be too busted. Like a 0 mana 3/3. Maybe in Warlock I want a 0 mana 3/3. I don't think I do, but we haven't really had a card like this before. You know, like Silverware Golem only fit in one specific deck, and it kind of built itself, the discard Warlock deck. Happy Ghoul you can put in anything, and you're going to play a bunch of incidental healing in the Warlock deck. So, like, is this card good enough in that deck? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe I play my little 2-mana Drain Life card and just throw this guy out whenever I life tap into him, and that's good. I don't know. I don't know if a 0 mana 3/3 that you play mid-game is good enough to go in a control deck. Maybe it is. And that's where, playing with it is going to kind of decide that. But at the end of the day, a 0 mana 3/3, any 0 mana card you really have to look at, even Snow Flipper Penguin, because at some point these things are going to see play. And it's worth thinking about. Just because, 0 mana is just so broken. And this guy, even if you can't heal yourself, he's a 3 mana 3/3. He's not like Dread Corsair, which is a 4 mana 3/3. A 3 mana 3/3 is totally reasonable to pay mana for. It's not a big deal. So I think this guy has a lot of potential, but whether he actually realizes that potential immediately when he gets released or later on, I don't know yet. But I do know that turn 2 off of Priest is not going to be common, because if it is common, nobody's going to attack Priest on turn 1. Got Bone Drake, Death Rattle, add a dragon to your hand. I mean, if you want like more dragon late game stuff, if you really want an additional dragon in your Priest deck, you can play like a singleton copy of this card. I don't think the power level is quite there to have the card be like insane. Like, it's decent. I don't think that like more cards is what Dragon Priest necessarily needed. I mean, it still helped the control matchup, but it's not like that broken. I think you'll discover it off of Nether Spite pretty often in a control matchup and then play it off that. But yeah, in Arena it's a good card. In Arena it's a great card actually, but yeah, in Constructed I don't expect this to make too much of a difference. Like, it may see play, but it's not ultimately going to change any of the Dragon decks win percentages at all, and I expect to see it off Nether Spite more than anything. At the end of your turn, give another random friendly minion 5 attack. Yeah, just another like stat buffing snowball-y 5-drop guy. Some chubby blue lizard thing. Looks like he's in the Ginyu Force or something. Yeah, I mean, it's got stats and stuff. You'll play it in Arena. Seems like a good Arena card for what it's worth. I don't know if 5-mana vanilla guys are still good. But yeah. Alright, next we got Shallow Gravedigger. Death Rattle, add a random Death Rattle minion to your hand. So Loot Hoarder costs 30% less mana, has 1 less attack, and draws you a good card rather than a random one. If you really want a lot of cycling Death Rattle dudes, like you're trying to turbo out like a Priest quest, maybe you play this. Maybe you curve Loot Hoarder into this, and somehow you're not dead on turn 4. Maybe. But how likely is that? I don't know. You know, from my perspective, I look at this card and I'm like, yup, that's a 3-mana card that's going to eat a Rusty Hook charge or trade with patches, and then I'm going to cry and get Maelstrom Portaled or get Mortal Coiled. So Mortal Coil is going to be in every deck now. Gets hero powered by Mage, gets hero powered by Druid, gets hero powered by Rogue. Literally every deck in the game kills this card without thinking about it. Is it worth 3 mana just to get an additional Death Rattle trigger? Probably not, but you can make a pretty low curve Quest Priest deck with enough more of those cards, or if enough of those cards get released, basically. All right, next we got Bone Mare, 7 mana Battlecry, give a friendly minion 4/4 and taunt. Whoa, that's big. I mean, in Arena, I see this being pretty strong. If you have the board at all, this can do some crazy stuff. You know, in Constructed, it's definitely not quite costed aggressively enough for it, but it's a powerful Battlecry. 4 mana 9/9, but, or sorry, 7 mana 9/9, but better, because you give taunt. Half of the stats have charge if you already have a minion in play, but then it's like worse if you have no minion. It's interesting, you know, but not really a constructed card, not worth talking about when it comes to standard, but for Arena, seems like a solid 7 mana dude. Nerubian Unraveler, this was the first card that Frozen Pone revealed. Card's garbage, I can say that because this is not my card reveal video anymore. Thank you, Blizzard, for letting me reveal it. I do appreciate it. I would love to reveal more cards in the future. Hopefully they'll be better than this one, because this is dust, and I don't want to look at it anymore. Tuskar Fisherman, Battlecry, give a friendly minion spell damage +1. Bit of a different spin on Kobold Geomancer. 2 mana 2/3s are better now than they ever have been, because the early game minions are a lot worse stat-wise than they were in the last rotation. But I don't think that's enough to make a random spell damage card want to see play. Like, if you're playing it on curve, which is what you want to be playing it on, you have to give the spell damage to a weak minion, like a Bloodsail Corsair or a Firefly, and then hope that they don't kill that minion, which will be low statted. Alternatively, if it's late game, like turn 5, if you're, like, the times when you want spell damage the most is when you're really far behind on board and you want to, like, Lightning Storm or Maelstrom Portal or something like that. So if you're behind on board, you don't have minions to use the Battlecry on. If it's turn 5, I would rather have Kobold Geomancer to Lightning Storm with, rather than Tuskar Finisher or Fisherman, because I don't have the mana to go Totem, Tuskar Fisherman, Lightning Storm. So overall, I think he's not strong enough to see playing constructed, but it's cool to see more takes on the spell damage mechanic. We got our Atcherus Veteran, which is a very cool card. It's a new take on Abusive Sergeant. You get the 2 attack back, like the unnerfed Abusive Sergeant, but you only get a 1 attack Battlecry. It's a permanent Battlecry, but the fact that it's permanent is not a very big deal at all. You'd way rather have 2 attack just for a turn. Like over 90% of the time you use one of these buff Battlecries, you trade that same turn. Otherwise you don't want to play them, so. Oh, is it Acherus? Is that how it's pronounced? But yeah, so basically if Zoo comes back in the meta after all of these broken patches and early game weapons rotate out, then Atcherus Veteran can start seeing play in very aggressive decks. It's definitely costed in a way where it's playable. It's just right now in this meta where we have Rusty Hook, where we have Mana Worm, where we have patches, where we have Jade Claw, summoning a 1/1 Jade. These types of cards are no longer good because the decks with the weapons don't want to play them, and the Zoo deck gets obliterated by the weapon decks, so you can't really play those in those decks either. Alright, next we got Fallen Sun Cleric, another buff, like Shattered Sun Cleric, but, you know, cheaper and smaller. This card would be pretty sick if it was a 2/2, but since it's a 2/1, it makes it very, very weak. The fact that I'm losing all of these stats to hero power just makes it basically unplayable. As a 2 mana 2/2, it'd be super interesting, and it would actually be like a very strong 2-drop, maybe too strong. But yeah, Shattered Sun Cleric is one of the first cards in the game that they nerfed. It used to be a 3-mana 3/3, which was absolutely broken back then. I don't know if it would even be good enough nowadays, but back then it was busted. Yeah, Grave Shambler. Whenever your weapon is destroyed, gain +1/+1. Yep. Furnace Fire Colossus is a really interesting card. It lets you kind of go all in, pitch all the weapons in your hand, and try to just kill your opponent with one random big dude. That might actually see play in the Tempo Warrior deck as like a one-of. You draw all your weapons, you pull a Gorehowl out of your deck with the weapon drawing card. They've used the removal on your Frothing Berserker and stuff already, and then all of a sudden you just plop down this guy, and you're just like, answer it or I win. And then they answer it and you uninstall the game. But one time in like 10 games they won't answer it, and then you just get attacked for 20 and they're dead. It's a pretty cool card. If you have no weapons, the stats aren't that bad. So I actually kind of like the card. It's really at its best with high durability, low attack weapons, such as Light's Justice and Sword of Justice. So if there's a high durability weapon-based Paladin deck that ends up emerging, this could definitely see play in that. That's a deck I've played before with like Argent Lance. I played the Patches package in that deck, but they haven't really added like a 2-mana weapon to Paladin, so I don't think that deck is there just yet. But yeah, so probably no deck for it right now, but it's not unplayable. It has potential. We got Tomb Lurker. Add a random Death Rattle minion that died this game to your hand. Just another 5-mana 5/3 that draws a card in a specialized way. There's a lot of cards that do this now. Lotus Agents, this thing. They're going to keep making more of them, you know. Ethereal Conjurer before it rotated. It's like, it's not going to see play for the same reason that Lotus Agent doesn't see play. It's like, card is okay, the stats are okay, it's like right on the fringe level of playable, but every time an expansion comes out, it's harder and harder for a card to find its way into a deck list. Because not only do you have all the good cards that are in Standard right now, but there's all these new cards coming in that are booting some old ones out. So is a 5-mana 5/3 that draws a card going to be good enough now to make it into your deck? Probably not. Probably not. A card just needs to do such broken things nowadays to see play, so I don't think Tomb Lurker will do that. It's just not quite good enough. Battlecry, give a friendly minion Death Rattle, resummon this minion. Like, I don't know if this effect lets that minion get rezzed off N'Zoth or something. I don't think it does. Overall, it's giving the resummon ability onto a neutral card, which we haven't seen before. We don't have to use the Ancestral Shaman card anymore. We don't have to use the new Paladin card that rezzes at 1 health. Now we can play Corpse Raider. And the stats on it are pretty good. For a 5-mana 3/3, you're getting the Ancestral Spirit on top of it. I really don't think that's enough to just like justify including this card in some existing deck, but the fact that we have this ability available in neutral might mean that it sees play in like a really niche deck because it combos with one specific card that you really want to resummon. I think it's unlikely, but you know, maybe there's like some hunter card down the line that they did not intend to have this effect and it ends up being broken. But right now, card's bad. I don't expect this to see play. I don't expect this to see play in the near future. Something weird has to get printed for this to really become run commonly. Seems like it only combos with Arcane Giant. Even then, it's not that good. Alright, Ticking Abomination. I really don't know why so many people were firing shots at this card. It's not that bad. All the Miracle Rogue decks back in the day would have loved to play this card. Because you're not playing minions early anyway. You know, if I play Swashbuckler, if I play Shaku even, all my minions are getting killed before turn 4 anyway. I'm just getting a 4-mana 5/6 with no drawback. That's like pretty strong in that kind of deck. I do think something like Twilight Drake is better in decks like Warlock that are like tapping a lot or drawing a lot, or even like a Control Mage that draws a bunch of cards. You'd rather play like Water Elemental so you get the Jaina lifesteal, but this card isn't that bad. There's too many good cards to play now in Miracle Rogue to want a 4-mana 5/6. but I don't know. 2 years ago, this would see play in that deck. We had Hungry Dragon before, and this is better than Hungry Dragon for that deck. But yeah, it's not broken, so it's not going to see play. It's just like decent. Skelemancer, Death Rattle. If it's your opponent's turn, summon an 8/8 skeleton. It's just too hard to make work. It's too slow. Too many things can go wrong. Potion. Like if you're playing against Priest, you can't even play this card. Silence can happen. Even if it goes off, it's not that good. Like, would I play a 5-mana vanilla 8/8 in? I mean, only in aggro, and I already have Bittertide Hydra. And even that's not good enough for most decks. And it's not because of the drawback, it's because they don't want a 5-mana 8/8. So, this card's garbage, it'll never see play. Yeah. I mean, there might be some kind of card printed where all of these opponents' turn Death Rattles can be used, but I can't imagine that card right now. We got Death Axe Punisher. Had a lot of bad cards in a row here, by the way. Sorry, most of the set review is pretty positive. Now that we're looking at neutral, mediocre cards, a lot of these are going to be negative in a row. Death Axe Punisher is hot garbage. A 4-mana 5/5 is like the stats you're getting if it buffed every time, and it doesn't buff every time. It only buffs if you have a lifesteal minion. Buffing a lifesteal minion is good, but you're not. How do I put this? Like, okay, imagine a 4-mana 5/5, just vanilla, no text. That's like good stats. It's better than Yeti, right? Now imagine a 4-mana 3/3 that gives a minion +2/2. That's a little different. It's better if you have board control, better than Yeti, like Houndmaster, for example. If you have board control, because half the stats are getting charged, you get to attack with that +2/2 right away. But if you don't have board control, it's way worse, right? So if you split the stats up as a buff, it's like worse. Now this is like the worst of all worlds. It doesn't matter if you have board control because you're going to get the buff just into your hand, but you also don't get to use that +2/2 of stats until you play your next minion, and then you get to attack with that minion. Unless it's like Wicker Flame or something. But so basically, I guess what I'm saying is like the cost versus the stats is like too small, because it's going to be way too long until you can use your +2/2 stats from the minion that you buffed, and it's also really slow. So this card is just basically bad. It's not going to see play even if you have a bunch of lifesteal stuff in your deck. Speaking of lifesteal stuff that's bad, we have Deadscale Knight. It's cute. They're going to keep printing 1-mana 1/1s and 2/1s with new mechanics, and good for them. It's not good enough for any Murloc decks. It's not good enough for pretty much anything. Vryghoul, you can compare this to Eggnapper. A 2/2 you could argue is better than 2 1/1s, but not by much, and not even in all decks. Vicious Fledgling has kind of taken the spot of Eggnapper in aggro Druid decks. Vryghoul is just not that good, too situational. No reason to play this card over Eggnapper or Harvest Golem or anything like that. So I skipped a row. Oh man, you're right, guys. My bad. Death Axe Punisher was so awful. I just wanted to get away from him very quickly. All right, Meat Wagon. Summon a minion from your deck with less attack than this minion. This is kind of interesting. It's a powerful Death Rattle, but right now in Standard, there aren't too many synergies with it. I don't want to play this in a buff deck, because a deck that buffs a lot of minions is going to have a lot of cheap minions. So it's going to have a lot of 1-mana bubble guys. It's going to have a lot of 2-drops. I don't want to be buffing Meat Wagon to just pull one of those. The stats on it suck on its own, but it does pull 0 attack guys out of your deck on its own. The coolest synergy right now that we have is Validated Doomsayer, which I think is still in Standard. Yeah. And Meat Wagon is pretty cool with that, but the problem there is you have to play like 2 copies of Validated Doomsayer just in case you draw one. And like, what if you draw 1 Validated Doomsayer naturally, and then you draw like 2 Meat Wagons? Then one of your Meat Wagons isn't going off. So there's a lot of like card draw RNG involved. And second of all, it's not that broken. Like, it's a 1/4 that's not even pulling a 7/7. It's pulling a 0/7. So if they kill your Meat Wagon with like a weapon, and they have some minions in play, they'll kill your Validated Doomsayer too. It's not really that busted. It does give you like it's still a lot of stats for very little mana, so maybe it has some potential, but right now I'm not really seeing it. It is a card that kind of gets more options as more sets get revealed, like so many cards do. Maybe with time it gets better. The mech tag might matter for Wild, or if they ever bring mechs back into Standard, but as for right now, it's not that good. Sorry about that Windows sound. Alright, next we got Phantom Freebooter, which is Battlecry gain stats equal to your weapons stats. I think that this card is pretty awful, even with like a Fiery War Axe. You're getting a, yeah, it's going to be on YouTube. This is even a Fiery War Axe, you're getting like a 6/4, which is just not good. Like, you basically want like at least 6 health on a 4-drop in order to justify playing it. So this is another one of those cards where in a deck with Light's Justice, I would consider it, right? If I have like a 4/7 for 4, like that's great. But there aren't really that many reasons to play like a high durability weapon paladin deck right now. So I don't really see this guy having a spot in any deck for the foreseeable future. Tainted Zealot. It's another option instead of Geomancer. I mean, it's probably, how do I put this? This and Geomancer are almost identical. The only deck that Geomancer has ever seen play in is Shaman, and that's only because Spirit Claw was a thing. Spirit Claw is no longer a thing, unless they print a spell damage reliant card like that again. Neither this card nor Kobold Geomancer will see play again. Some people in chat are saying Defile combo. That doesn't matter because Defile is broken on its own. There's no reason to play a bad card to make your broken card more broken. I'd rather just have a good card plus a broken card, rather than a bad card plus a slightly more broken card. Alright. Next we got Corpse Taker, which is actually really interesting. The first time I saw this card, I was like, holy shit, is this the best card in the set? And then I kind of thought about it more, and it's not actually that broken. They were pretty careful about the abilities they let you copy. A single Wicker Flame Burn Bristle gives you 3 of these abilities, which is really sick. Like I said, you probably want to play 1 copy of the Charge Lifelink guy, just in case you draw the Wicker Flame. But, yeah, the question is it good enough? At first, I was like, this is broken. You can just play like 1 Alec here, you get all these things. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, well, there's already Silver Moon Guardian in the game, like the 4-mana Divine Shield 3/3, right? Does giving him Wind Fury matter at all? Not really. It's not enough reason for me to play him. Does giving him Divine Shield Lifesteal make me want to play him? Well, maybe. That's actually getting to like pretty good stat levels. What about Divine Shield Taunt Lifesteal? That actually becomes pretty interesting. It's like probably good enough that I want to include it in those Paladin decks, but at the same time, not as broken as it sounds, because when you're playing a card like that on turn 4, you're going to obliterate Pirate Warriors with it. You just played a Divine Shield Taunt that's going to gain you 6 life. But, or like 3 life if they Mortal Strike it. But is that good enough to make it in a deck nowadays? I think it is. I think in Paladin I will play this because I'm playing Wicker Flame anyway, because I already have the Tyrion anyway, and then I just play the 1 Lifesteal Charge guy just so I have a 2nd Lifesteal copy. And these Corpse Takers become like insane taunt cards. So I think it's still super powerful. I think it is going to see play in most Paladin decks. The question is, will it see play in like Shaman or other cards? I can't say for certain. But in Paladin, I know I'm going to start by playing 2 of it and go from there. So it's a very powerful card. Excited to see where it goes. This might be a meta-defining card for a couple expansions moving forward. It's super powerful, but it's definitely not for every class. So I think Paladin's the obvious one right now because of Wicker Flame, and whether it sees play in other classes, we'll know with time. So, by the way, Paladin is like the most insane late game thing now with Uther, and then its early game is playing this kind of crap. So, like, how does Pirate Warrior beat Paladin either? You're curving, like, Stonehill into this thing, or, like, Wicker Flame into this. Like, Jesus Christ. I don't know, dude. Paladin looks like super tier 1. It only loses to combo, but Blizzard countered every combo deck by removing them from the game. So, yeah, I don't know, dude. Control Paladin looks nutty. Alright, so I did that row. Keening Banshee. When you play a card with the top 3 cards of your deck. So a lot of people read this text and they're like, lol, card's garbage. When I read this text, I kind of don't see it. I kind of just see a vanilla 4-mana 5/5. Like, this text doesn't really matter. That drawback isn't really a drawback. But would I play a 4-mana 5/5 with 0 text? No. If it was a 4-mana 5/6, it'd be pretty damn good. But it's not. I just don't want to play a 4-mana 5/5 with no text. It's not good enough for any deck right now, so. It's bad because of the stats. It's not bad because of the ability. Alright, Serenite Chain Gang is a fantastic card. 2/2/3 taunts for 4 mana. That's actually cheaper than Feral Spirits. Feral Spirits cost 5 overall. This card's fantastic. It takes 2 hits to punch through to your face. I don't think you get 2 charges on your Warrior Quest. I think you only get 1 with this. But it's still so good, and you still play it in that deck. It's one of the better taunt minions that there are. You probably play it in Druid just to ramp into it turn 3. It's good to ramp into. It's good to innervate out. Just a great defensive card. So I like it a lot. Yeah, I expect to play it a lot. It's not like Sludge level. It's not Sludge Belcher levels of broken, but it's pretty good. I like the card a lot. I would not be surprised if that's a staple in the meta. You can evolve it too. Yeah, there's a lot, hand buff. Yeah, that's right. You can hand buff it. There's a lot of potential synergies with this card. It's definitely interesting. Alright, so Death Speaker. Battlecry, give a friendly minion immune this turn. I'm sure this will be used to fuel a bunch of shitty YouTube videos where people do infinite combos with stuff. I don't know, maybe Defile or just other stuff. Defile's another one of those like game-breaking cards. Hopefully Blizzard auto-programmed it to stop after like 50 rotations or something. Yeah, give a friendly minion immune this turn. It's pretty much like give it Divine Shield, but like temporary. I'm not firing shots at Toast. I know a lot of people make those videos. Toast makes some of the better ones, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, Death Speaker, not really for me. As far as like, will it see competitive play? Probably not. It's just it's another way to like trade up if you already have board control. Like I said, it's like divine. It's like giving something Divine Shield but worse because you don't get the Divine Shield synergy. So it's like okay, but okay cards are not good enough to see playing constructed. Yeah, Drakari Enchanter, end of turn effects triggered twice. I'm sure in Wild this will be broken. I'm sure this will be used for some infinite combos as well. A lot of people will bring up the fact that this works with the new Lich King, but I don't think that that synergy is good enough to make this card see play in Standard unless there's more end of turn things that are also good. Emperor Thorson seems like the best thing in the game to do with this, but yeah, it works with the new Dreadsteed, I guess. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, but we'll see. I think in Wild it's definitely stronger, and it's a cool effect to have in the game. Pretty powerful moving forward. Necrotic Geist, whenever one of your other minions dies, summon a 2/2 ghoul. Pretty much garbage. I mean, you have to trade a bunch of stuff off to make it good. The stats suck. The cost is expensive. I'd rather just play like Cult Master. So it's just a mediocre arena card. Even in arena, it's probably not great. We got Wretched Tiller. Whenever this minion attacks, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. So you play it, and they'll probably coin hero power it. So just because of that interaction, I think it probably won't see play. It's not quite the guaranteed damage that old Leper Gnome used to give us. So I'm not too optimistic about this card. I think it's just another, you know, another 1-drop they're putting in the game for the sake of variety. Cool card, I guess, but yeah, the 1-mana minion design space is pretty narrow. There's not too many new things they can do. Mindbreaker, hero powers are disabled. That's pretty cool. 3-mana 2/5 is decent stats. I like the artwork on this card. It's basically like White Walker Rick or something. Fuck your hero powers, Morty. Yeah, I'm trying to think of hero powers that you actually want to disable consistently. In order to justify playing this deck, you have to kind of... In order to justify playing this in a deck, you have to be playing a deck that's worried about some specific hero power. And I don't think there's any deck that's really worried about hero powers at the moment. So you're probably not going to justify playing this in any deck. The Death Knight hero powers aren't worth playing around with a 3 mana 2/5. Like, the Death Knights come down in like turn 9 or 10. And half the problem's the battle cry with a lot of them. Disabling hero power really doesn't do that much for you, I think. Yeah, I expect this card to never see play, but it's actually kind of interesting. The stat line isn't bad. It's another way to have counterplay against certain things in the game that we didn't really have tools against before. So now we got Bloodworm, which a lot of people would look at this card and they would be like, oh man, this is unplayable. It barely has text. It's just a 5 mana 4/4. Personally, I think Bloodworm might have some potential. Unlikely, but maybe. Basically, lifesteal. You guys heard me talk about anti-Keelbot a lot when I talked about Warlock, and how I think Warlock would be a tier 2 or a tier 1 deck if it just had anti-Keelbot. This card is not anti-Keelbot. It's a lot worse. It's very killable to prevent you from ever getting the life gain, and it competes with cards like Cult Apothecary. But all those things considered, it still gains you life. And it's possible that in like a Kazakus type of Warlock deck, you still want to include this, just have one additional source of life gain. The stat line isn't that bad for a 5-drop. I mean, it's bad, but it's not like the absolute worst. And yeah, I wouldn't be like too surprised if this ends up somehow seeing play. But overall, like, what are the actual odds? Do I think that this will see play in Warlock? Less than 10%. It's probably not going to see play, but the point I want to get across is the fact that you have to kind of consider every lifesteal card in neutral as a Warlock card moving forward. So if they print some more good ones, if this thing was like 4 mana, for example, it doesn't have to be that good to be an auto-include in Warlock. Alright, so we got 1/1 for each minion that died this turn. You can do some infinite combos with this in Defile, I'm sure, but I still think that you'd rather have a Cult Master pretty much any time that you have one of these when a minion dies effects. This counts your opponent's minions, which is cool, but probably a little bit too difficult to make that work. We got Prince Keleseth. If your deck has no 2-cost cards, give all minions in your deck 1/1. I'm trying to think of a deck where you don't want to play 2 drops, but you also want to play a lot of minions to buff. And it's actually pretty tough. I don't really think there's a deck for this guy. You can play him in like oh, in Zoo? Yeah, I guess if you played like 16 1-drops, you don't really need 2 drops. Maybe you just play Prince Keleseth in like a Zoo deck and you try to high roll. A Zoo or Token Druid. So in Token Druid you wouldn't play Power of the Wild? That seems tough. Quest Hunter, okay. Quest Hunter, I could see that. Yeah, it's an interesting card. There's a couple niche decks where it fits in. It's not the absolute worst. I just, I don't think there's like a high tier deck right now that it would slot into, but there's definitely some decks where you would auto include it, and it would be very powerful. It is one of the stronger effects of the princes. Next we got Hildnir Frostrider. I wouldn't play a 3 mana 4/4 even if it had no drawback. If it was a 3/5, then we'd be talking, but a 3 mana 4/4 is pretty much the same thing as Spider Tank. The extra attack isn't that good. So the Battle Cry makes it super unplayable, even though the stats already made it unplayable. So not going to see too much constructed play. In Arena, I'm sure it's decent though. Next we got Arthas, which is a pretty cool card. 4 mana 2/2. Personally, I think Gnomish Inventor is probably going to be better. This is a card that's too dangerous to play against Priest. The stat line sucks. Dead against aggro. It's just got too many things going against it that make it a little bit tough to justify running. There aren't too many really good 4 mana Death Rattles though, so maybe you could play it in like a Quest Priest or something like that. But for the most part, I think Arthas is probably not good enough to make the cut in most lists. But I love the flavor on this card. It's hilarious. Props to Blizzard for the design here. It looks really, it's just a funny card. So yeah, not quite strong enough, but maybe if the stat line is better. Next we got Spell Weaver. Spell damage +2. Yep. Prince Tal'Daram is a 3-mana 3/3. Battlecry. If your deck has no 3-cost cards, transform into a 3/3 copy of a minion. That's actually a pretty powerful Battlecry. It's not too tough to build a deck without 3-drops. There's a lot of decks that naturally want to do it already. Or can get away with not playing 3-cost cards. The cool thing here is it says if your deck has no 3-cost cards. So if I draw my 3-cost cards before I play this guy, he's still active, right? So that's kind of interesting. It might be possible to do that in... what kind of deck would you do that in? I mean, you want this Battlecry in a more control-oriented deck. Most control decks right now have pretty good 3-drops. Maybe like Paladin? What 3-drop do you want to play in Control Paladin? Oh, you want to play Wicker Flame and Stonehill. Yeah, even that deck doesn't work. Rogues? Yeah, in Rogue it's interesting. You do want to play Shaku. You don't have to play Fan of Knives. You don't have to play SI Agent. You don't have to play Shaku. You do have to play Edwin. You do have to play Edwin. Big Druid, yeah, if you don't play Jade Blossom or Feral Spirit, which you don't, or Feral Rage, you don't have to play those. Yeah, maybe in Big Druid. Could be decent. Yeah. I mean, I know that a lot of these princes seemed like pretty disappointing cards to a lot of people, but the truth is, the way that they're designed, they can't be like too good, because it's anytime they're active in a deck, they're just like way above the power curve. So there's going to be some deck list in the future, even if there isn't one right now, for all of these princes to fit into. And then in that deck, they're going to be like excellent draws every time. So it's not like the flashiest legendary design, but they're not unplayable. We got a 5-mana 2/5 poisonous, just yep, generic arena card. Not going to see any constructed play. And here we've got the Lich King, which might be the actual best card in the expansion. I could argue that that Uther, like the Death Knight, is better, but even if I made that argument, people would go back and be like, oh, well, Lich King was obviously the best card of the expansion. Why? Because he's neutral, so you're going to see him like way more often. So Lich King is sick. This is like the finisher that every control deck has wanted for a long time. It's Ironbark Protector. It draws you a card guaranteed. That card is nuts. If it lives, it draws you more cards. This card's fantastic. You can get it off of Barnes. It's, I don't know. Card's nuts. Lich King's fantastic. Craft it on day 1. You won't regret it. It's going to be a slow meta. In that slow meta, this is like the best 8-mana card you can play. It's better than like Medivh and Mage even. Yeah, card's just insane. The Death Knight cards that you can get, you guys can Google those. I don't want to pull them up right now, but hopefully my editor can pull them up here for the YouTube video. But yeah, there's a lot of solid ones. So there's very few bad Death Knight cards to get. They're all very much above the power curve, and yeah, pretty solid card. All right, next we got Prince Valinar. You get a 4-mana 4/4 lifelink and Taunt, which is a pretty good stat line if you're playing a deck with no 4-cost cards. The decks with no 4-cost cards tend to be pretty aggressive, I think. I feel like most of the control decks play some 4-drop at least. Maybe Mage could get away with not playing one. And that deck does want lifesteal more than most. Actually, what about Rogue right now? What 4-drops are you playing in Rogue? There's no more Tomb Pillager. Fireball. Control Warrior, yeah. Okay, there's Sherazin, but you don't need to play Sherazin. Sherazin's great in Rogue, but this card might be better. Gaining life in Rogue is insane. And the point is, there's no obvious place to slot him in right now. And he's not that flashy even when he works. It's a good card, and there will be decks where he's an auto-include. And then finally we got Night Howler, which is a 4-mana 3/4. Whenever it takes damage, you disenchant it. So, that, ladies and gentlemen, is my Knights of the Frozen Throne set review. I'm sorry if that sounded a little negative towards the end, but we had to slog through a whole bunch of neutral garbage. Overall, it's one of the more powerful sets I've ever seen. All the Death Knights are good cards. Even Rexxar, He just has the unfortunate drawback of being a hunter card. Druid looks nutty. Mage looks still very good. Paladin looks actually nutty. Priest looks weird, but I'm excited to test the fatigue lists. Rogue has some really hard to evaluate cards, but one of the most powerful lines of text in the game, which is gaining stealth on your hero. Excited to see what we can do with Rogue. And Rogue is a class that the classics, like the vanilla Rogue cards are so powerful that if you don't need that many powerful cards in Rogue to make it busted. So they have to be really careful with what Rogue cards they do print. Shaman gained so little. Shaman gained like only Thrall for only the Evolved deck. I think Shaman's the class that's going to change the least before and after the expansion. Maybe Ice Fishing plus Burlock is enough to make like a Quest Shaman control deck work, but it's very unlikely. So, Warlock back in the game, boys. If it only got Defile, it would be competitive. And it got Dreadlord on top of that. It got Gul'dan, so you got a plan for killing people. Really excited to play some Warlock. Also, Drain Soul is a good card. You'll play 2 of that just to help set up your Defiles and get some more incidental life gain. And then Warrior, Tempo Warrior looks sick. Really excited to play Tempo Warrior. Looks very fun to play. Looks like it has a lot of synergy. You've got strong early game. You've got strong late game. You got insane mid game. One of the best draw spells ever made. Yeah. On top of Battle Rage. God, you have this card and Battle Rage. It's so sick. But yeah, really excited to play some Warrior. Looks very high tier to me. And yeah, some pretty cool neutrals on top of it all with some Lich King that we're going to see in a lot of decks. So thank you guys for watching the set review. I do appreciate you tuning in for all of that. It has been fun. Drop a like, a follow, subscription, whatever it is that you want to drop. I would appreciate it. I'm going to get this up on YouTube ASAP. I've got a dinner that I'm going to be going to in about 30 minutes. So unfortunately, I can't continue the stream. But I do appreciate you guys watching up until this point. And let's see who's streaming so we can drop them a fat host. You guys can go show them some love. Let's see, do I have anybody streaming Hearthstone for Tempo right now? It doesn't seem like it. Let's give Mune Fair as a host. One of the best Heroes of Storm streamers in the world. Go check them out. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Everybody that sub, donated, all of that, I'm actually just going to read these off right now rather than hosting. So for those of you guys that want to tune out, thanks for watching up until this point. So shout out to Renchi for that Prime sub. Cam, the Cam dropping 11 months. Stomps K with the 4 months. Shifty Devil subbed. Based 80s and Side Duck Y'all for the Prime subs. Thank you guys. Life Hacks drops $3. Says hold control and mouse wheel up to zoom in on a page. Makes it easy for all of us. Yeah, I should have done that. My bad. Should have made the card bigger. Babby Legs, thank you for the 100 bits, man. Curtis, appreciate the 9 months. Kalka, Dono, Kos Rojo, Zerch, Mimic, thank you for the Prime subs, guys. Thank you so much. Sarah HS dropping the 8 months. Welcome back. JT Regular Dude with the 8 months as well. Thanks to the resubs. Peep for the 100 bits. Much appreciated. The Xanger, Do You Itch, Maximum Mech, and Skytech Kid all Prime subbed. Thank you so much, guys, for remembering that you do get a monthly Prime subscription with your Amazon Prime account. Much appreciated. Ragna Lips and Nikki is Drunk. Thank you for the 11 months, for the 12 months. Bring back B-Facts, dropping the $3. I miss B-Facts, man. Thanks a lot, dude. UD Rocco and Volpesto dropping the Prime subs. Thank you, guys. And Zulian for the 3 months and Zabadon for the 8 months. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for the subs, the resubs, donations. You guys are awesome. Those of you guys that don't know, I do want to give a shout out to Master Drop as well. Master Drop has been sponsoring Tempo Storm for a little over a month now. For those of you guys that haven't heard of the website, I don't really plug it, although I should plug it more often. We're going to make some cool custom stuff with them to show off that I'm actually pretty excited about. But what Master Drop is basically a website that lets you commit to buying something with a big group of people, something that's custom made and really high end. So like different headsets or men's accessories or like keyboards or anything like that, an amp. You basically pick the things you're into, audiophile, tech, whatever, and there's a bunch of custom stuff that gets made by industry experts, and it's always top of the line, and you always get it at a huge discount because a lot of you are buying it together, so you get it at a much cheaper than it would retail for. So a really cool website. Highly recommend you check it out. They're supporters of Tempo Storm, supporters of the team, all of our players. So they're awesome guys and girls over at Mass Drop. So go check it out if you're ever curious about that. I'm going to get going. Thanks for watching, guys. And I will see you tomorrow, I hope. Yeah. Peace.